following podcast contains spoilers and adult language and some awkward silences. But don't worry, we're going to get through this together. Slowly.
This is a message from the Office of Emergency Preparedness. Due to the recent crisis, we ask that you remain in your homes. Do not attempt to communicate or interact with the creatures, even if they are people you know.
Lock your doors. Bar your windows. Evil is coming. It's time for Aim for the Head, a horror apocalypse entertainment podcast. And now, here are your hosts, Diana and Steve.
Hi, welcome back to Aim for the Head podcast. I'm Diana.
And I'm Marty McFly. No, I'm Steve. It just seems like I'm Marty McFly because I'm having just the strongest case of deja vu right now, D. I don't know about you.
I am. Once again, we're very excited to be back in the world of The Last of Us. This week we're covering the Season 2 premiere. Episode 1 of Season 2's title is Future Days. And the reason we're joking around a little bit is that we recorded this, had a technical issue, and lost it, and now we're recording it again. Our feelings and our points on the show haven't changed, but we're just, we've had this happen a couple of times in our lifetime, our podcast lifetime, and, you do the best you can, but you never can really recapture the essence of the conversation you had. So that being said, we won't be able to achieve the same conversation we had last night, but maybe this new conversation will be, slightly different, even though we're covering exactly the same stuff we covered last night.
I was thinking what we could do is whatever we have for our points, just go with the opposite viewpoint of whatever we were going to say. So for something that you really liked in the show, now you really hated it, and vice versa.
Okay, that's going to take a lot of brain cells to deal with that. I'm not sure I can devote that much to this. What I can devote to is let's chat really quick what our quick thoughts were on this episode. Our previous episode, Steve went first on his quick thoughts. And that previous episode, by the way, if you just reverse back one episode, we covered Escape from New York. Classic movie. You should listen to it. It's so much fun. Anyway, so Steve went first last time, so I'll go first and talk quick thoughts. And I would say for season premiere of a show, they hit a lot of the marks that you would want to hit on a season premiere. We in some areas we sort of jumped right in feet first, but in other areas we're sort of like picked up right where we left off in a way, and we'll get to that when we get through our points. But I would say I loved the building of the story. There were some moments that were a little bit slower because we've got to do a little bit more world building with the real deep dive into daily life in Jackson for all of them. So there's a little bit of the tedium of day-to-day existence. But the handful of little moments of action, especially with Ellie and Dina, that moment with, the great action, edge of your seat, exactly what you're looking for in Last of Us, nervous and excited and all of that stuff. But also, new characters, interesting people, lots of layers to these new characters, and a lot of things that are gonna develop as they go along, and it looks like revenge and bad feelings are going to be the theme of season 2, pretty much. So how about you? How do you feel about the season premiere, episode 1?
I think very similar to what you just said. I was really excited. I think we both really worked very hard to isolate ourselves and not be spoiled. Not to see anything or hear anything about what could be coming up. And so I think both of us kind of went into it like, ooh, this is going to be, what are they going to do? Now, I have, just like with season 1, I have played, The Last of Us Part 2, which is the sequel to the original game. And so I at least have an idea of what the game did with the story after part one
Right.
ended. But, like
Right.
we've pointed out, they announced, it came out, and I know we both saw this maybe about a month ago, 6 weeks ago maybe. It came out that either Craig Mazin or Neil Druckmann had said that this season is not going to follow the video game plot quite as closely as
Mm-hmm.
season one did. And so that
Right.
that of
Right.
course made me really intrigued, because now I'm like, ooh, what are they gonna do? What's gonna be different, and so on. And so I replayed it just recently, last week, and so a lot of the game elements are very fresh in my mind, and so I'm very excited to watch the crossover moments when they happen. And right away in this episode, there were several moments that they lifted straight out of the game, and that's always fun. And I'm also excited to see where are they going to, zig instead of zagging, right? And one of the things about the show that it just blew me away last year, and this year it's just picking right up again and doing it again, is how incredible they are at casting actors who look just like the video game characters.
Yeah. It's funny. I didn't even play the game, but invariably you come across like someone shares an image and they're like, this is this person and this person. And you're like, wow, and you're right. They really did such a good job.
Particularly with Dina and Jesse, it's and Abby, I should say. It's very, I mean, it's like, wow, so that's always been exciting and fun. And so, and like you said, there was some definitely a little bit of setup in this episode to sort of get us up to speed as to, the world that Ellie and Joel are now in, because it's different than it was last in season one. But then once they get going, there is an action sequence that is very scary and intense and wonderful. And at the same time, really when they end the episode, I'll talk about it more when we get into our points and stuff, but at the end of this episode is kind of where the video game starts, really.
Okay.
With a few exceptions, like the weeds in the drain pipe, that was not necessarily in the game, but the Abby stuff kind of, appearing with Jackson in the distance kind of thing, that's kind of where the game begins. So, but yeah, so far I'm totally on board, and I think, we're like, both of us, I think after this episode, we're firmly, adjusting those seatbelts, because we're getting ready for the ride to start. So.
Oh, absolutely. And for those that are perhaps you didn't listen to our season 1 coverage and you're sort of jumping in with season 2, first of all, our season 1 coverage, fantastic. We had a lot of fun covering season 1. That exists in episodes 275 through episodes 281. There are 2 spots there where we doubled up on some episodes because we were a little bit behind in our coverage. But anyway, so that exists, so please go listen to it if you hadn't yet. But if you're not familiar with our sort of where we're coming from, just as a sort of reminder, Steve has played the game, and I have not. So we both sort of approaching it from this really great, like, dual perspective, where you have knowledge of the source material, and I do not, and sort of approaching it from that area. And it's interesting that they're going to deviate from the source material. So in some instances, we're both going to be like right on the same page.
God. Oh, yeah.
Because we won't know what's, and even now that we know that they're going to deviate, you don't know what that is. They haven't said what the deviations are going to be. So really, even though there could be a scene that you're like, okay, this is direct from the game, just because it starts out that way doesn't mean they won't like veer off somewhere when it goes somewhere. So it's going to be equally as exciting for both of us. So I'm pretty excited about this.
And that's on the heels of season 1, where except for some cosmetic changes, they pretty much followed the video game plot from beginning to end. I think the biggest difference that I can remember is that where you remember when they're early on when they're driving and somebody throws a cinder block in the car and they ambush them and then they're kind of in the city.
Yeah.
That like in the
Yeah.
game that's in like Pittsburgh, and in
Yeah.
the series I think it was in Kansas City if I'm remembering right, because isn't that where Melanie Linsky and all those people were?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
So
Yeah.
like that was like a cosmetic change, even though like the events there that they showed were a lot of them were straight game moments and stuff. But again, the fact that they've already come out and said, yeah, we're not really going to do that as closely has got me really like, what is that? How are they going to change it? What are they going to do? That's going to be different.
Alert.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. So suffice to say, we both really liked this episode. We're excited to talk about our details that really stuck out to the both of us. But before we do that, let's go through a quick episode description, what we were expecting to see in episode 1, and then we'll talk through the writers and director of the episode. So Steve, please take it away.
All right. Well, again, this is episode 2.1 of The Last of Us, and as you said, the title of the episode is Future Days. And the description that we have is as follows. 5 years after the events in Salt Lake City, a now 19-year-old Ellie makes a discovery while on patrol with her best friend Dina. Back in Jackson, Joel seeks help to mend his relationship with Ellie. And those are two of the things that happened in this episode. So,
two of the many
Oh, there was
things.
so much more, so much more.
I know. I think we are going to be the victims of HBO trying to hold all the cards to their chest. And that's not unusual. So this is the most that they wanted to tell us before going into this. So.
And that, you know what?
I don't
blame them either, because I would much rather have it be like this and we can joke about it rather than they reveal too much and get very verbose and then, let you know that, Ellie turns out to be a robot. What? You couldn't have let us discover that by watching, so, yeah.
Oh my God, is Ellie a robot?
You know what?
Is that like a side story I don't know about?
What?
She's AI. That's what she is.
I don't know what they're going to do and not do. I just got to tell you that.
Okay. So, moving on. So, writers and the director for the episode, some names we're familiar with, maybe one we're not, but yeah, let's chat about those.
Okay, well, it's funny because this for this episode at least we get two people credited as writing, and then Craig Mazin comes up as director and written for TV. And so what that tells me is that the two writers, which is Neil Druckmann and a gal named Haley Gross, they wrote the plot of the video game. And then Craig Mazin, who of course is the TV guy out of the three of them, at least the bigger of the TV guy person out of the three of them, he wrote the script, the teleplay for this episode. So he took their story and then actually put it into a television episode format. So again, we have Craig Mazin, Neil Druckmann, and again the newcomers Haley Gross. And of course Druckmann and Mazin we talked about a lot last year because hey, guess what? They wrote a lot of the episodes last year, And Neil Druckmann, he's the video game guy. He's the guy who is part of Naughty Dog Games. He this is kind of his baby. He developed this idea. He came up with this crazy idea about let's do a zombie game. Let's do what can we do that's different? And he came up with the mushroom, the cordyceps, the fungus, all of that, and developed it. And of course, it was a massive hit for them, and so on. And so for part 2, he teamed up with Haley Gross to write the story for that. And Haley Gross is a writer. She's an actor. Her writing credits that she has besides The Last of Us game, she wrote episodes of Westworld. She wrote episodes of Broad City and of another HBO Max show called Banshee. So, and I'm pretty sure on Westworld, that's maybe where she crossed paths with Craig Mazin, or at least he became aware of her.
Yeah.
And anyway, Druckmann and her teamed up for writing the video game portion of it, or the story of it. And then, like I said, our director is Craig Mazin, and Craig Mazin, oh my God, amazing television manufacturing person, right? And you can look up his IMDb. He's done a lot of stuff, but I think we just can start and end with Chernobyl.
Why bother? It's pretty much the gold standard for taking subject matter that is absolutely heartbreaking and making it look it's astounding and also beautiful all at the same time, even though it's we also covered Chernobyl. You can look in our back catalog, and it's just haunting and awful, but beautiful in its own way. And he's just really skilled at that. Very skilled at that. There's really nobody better.
Well, for me, the thing is, we lived through when Chernobyl happened, so we know that the world didn't end. Yet when you're watching that show, you really have a sense of, oh my God, the world could end here.
It came really close. We learned some history there that we're like, oh, I'm not sure I was aware that we were that close. Yeah, that close, people.
So that's a credit to him, like that he's just that good of a storyteller. Yeah. So anyway, we have, like I said, Craig Mazin, director. He also wrote the teleplay for this episode, and then the writers of just the game, the overall story of part 2 is Neil Druckmann and Haley Gross. So that is your writers and your director.
Fantastic. When we jump right in to the cold open, it covers a couple of things, which I was surprised, and I don't know about you, but really the very first scene when we jump into the cold open, they literally pick up right where we left off. So we've got the scene from the final episode, that last moment with Joel and Ellie, where they're sort of like on the side of a hill, they're almost back to Jackson, and we stop, and Ellie, implores, tell me the truth, did everything happen with the fireflies the way you said it did? And he pauses and says, yes. And she pauses and says,
okay.
Okay. But in that moment, and it just goes to show like that, it's so much more than words and saying the words, and there's so much more to acting than doing that. In that moment that she knows he's lying, he knows that she knows he's lying, and there's just this sort of like terrible thing now that's been created, this ball of energy that's sort of sucked out of their souls and is sitting right in front of them, and they can both see it, and they know that they both are like lying to each other about it, but it is what it is. Like they have to sort of move on, and she makes that choice. She's sort of like you can see her sort of her eyes change. There's a change behind her eyes.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah. So we go from that, and then right after that, you've got this image of you go from this immense sadness, and then it goes to this image that you associate in that final episode with joy and beauty, and you see the giraffes, and you're like, oh my God, the giraffes. And then the giraffes sort of move to the side and they pan out a little, and you're like, oh, those are crosses. So that's where they buried some people. And it becomes clear that this is the post attack to the fireflies scene, and we are meeting these people for the first time, and there's just so much pain and anger in that moment. And it's so funny how like the middle piece right there was the giraffes, and like there was pain on one side of it and pain on the other, and it's just it's such an interesting way to meet these new characters. And we also find out that scene happens, it's 3 days after the attack at the hospital. And it sort of goes from there, and we learn, that they're it. That's all that's left, really, because they're talking about it with each other, and they realize they're it for the Fireflies. And it all ends with a moment of, promised revenge. And I put a note in my notes about, this was the cold open, but I thought I was pretty smart when I said revenge is a dish best served in the cold open.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things I wanted to chat about just for a hot second is I did a rewatch, and if you're listeners of the show, you'll know, like, we were doing a rewatch as we were heading into this, and also, as giving people like clips to our old podcast episodes. But I just watched the finale a day or so before the first episode. Mm-hmm. And in watching it again, I had this moment right when he shoots the doctor. The nurses are left in the room, and they just turn to the wall. Now, I don't know if he kills those nurses, and it's a scene we don't see, or does he just let them live, and they stay there, and they're maybe one or two of the survivors or whatever. And I just think it's interesting because in that moment, I was thinking, oh, he might have let those nurses live. Like, I wonder if that's going to come and bite him in the ass again. So, and to have gone from that, and then the very first thing we do is we meet these people. I'm like, oh, so there are some survivors. Oh, this isn't going to go well for Joel. So how about you? What did you think of the, that whole cold open going from Joel and Ellie over to our introduction to Abby?
Right. Well, it's just in game purposes, the giraffe scene with Abby and this like Arlington cemetery size cemetery that they've dug, right? That's not in the game at all. We don't get that, and I understand why they did it here, for the show, because they want us to see who Abby is and kind of learn why is she, hell bent on revenge, and give us some of her motivation and her background.
Right.
So I think, you kind of touched upon it there, and that what I think they do a really good job of bringing across to us is that Joel just doesn't go in and rescue Ellie at the end of season 1. I mean, he also basically wipes out the Fireflies to do it, and these, like, what is there, like 5 or 6 people there, with Abby total. I mean, it's not like she's by herself, but there's not a lot of them, and they're like, what do we do? Where do we go? Maybe we find some other Fireflies, and literally one of them goes, "This was the Fireflies," and so they're like, they're certainly searching, like, what are we gonna do? And of course, Abby there is like, no, screw that. I tell you, what we're doing? We're going after him. We're gonna find him and we're gonna get him. And I know we had talked about this in another dimension when we talked about this the first time, and you brought this up, which is, imagine if the story had started with this moment and we did not get any of last season at all, and we were introduced to Abby, and she's explaining what happened. We would look at Abby as the hero,
Yeah,
and
exactly. It's got a real, like, Walking Dead, Negan / Rick feeling, like we talked at the time. Like, if you looked at the Negan and Rick things from the Negan perspective, Rick is kind of the bad guy. So it's like, when you look at it from Abby's perspective, I mean, you already knew that Joel did some bad things, but you can sort of agree with, like, the outcome. But then once you put a face to all that devastation,
it starts to become a little bit grayer, not quite as black and white.
A little more morally gray area. Yes.
And I mean, I would actually point out, if you just go back and look at The Walking Dead as a whole, Rick's group is horrible. Every other
Oh
group
yeah.
they encounter, they destroy. Everyone. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
or take over or eliminate the people in charge. You know what I mean? It's just, yeah, you could certainly make the argument that Rick's group is like the problem.
Oh hell yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, and so here we get this sort of charged moment, where Abby is just out for blood, right, and wants to go right away, and of course the other ones point out that we don't even know for sure what his name is. It could be Joel, could be Joe, and we don't even know why he did what he did, and right, one of them kind of has heard the story of, well, he was supposed to be bringing in someone who was immune, and another one in the group is like, yeah, that's crazy because that's impossible and that can't be it, and so they kind of know he's a smuggler, and maybe they had a deal that went bad, and then like that, but then they're like, why did he kill everybody, and so they're very unsure except for her, and ultimately one of them talks about they've got someone they know, his brother runs a group in Seattle, and this guy's name is Isaac, and they said that group apparently is fairly well established. Let's go join up with them, and once we get in with them, maybe they have resources we can use to get a lead on where Joel is going or has gone, and maybe they can provide us with the equipment and so on for us to do this mission. And so again, this is 5 years ago, right? So then Abby and her group go off, and the first scene with Joel and Ellie, the lie scene, let's just call it that, right? Where Joel tells the story about how raiders attacked the hospital, and he barely got Ellie out, and that's why she's like wearing her hospital gown. All of her stuff is gone, right? And everything. He's like, I just barely got you out alive, and she then, as you said, as they're walking back to Jackson, because the car eventually dies, and she turns to look at him, and they're literally on the hill, and Jackson is down in the valley, and she's like, swear to me that what you said happened with the Fireflies is all true. So even then, Ellie's kind of like, really? I'm not 100% that you're being 100% with me, and he just bold-faced lies to her face and says, I swear. And like you said, you can tell by the look on her face that she doesn't believe him, but she accepts it.
Yeah, she kind of is you can see, like, there's a moment there where she knows she's kind of stuck. She doesn't believe it, but her options are limited.
What is she going to do?
She wants to believe him, wants to trust him. And it's crazy because she just went from like one extreme to the other, which was she saved his life, and he saved hers, and they were, when they walked away from that compound with, the bad people, you had this sense that like they are such a strong unit together, and they have let down their guard for each other, and they trust each other, and to have gone from that to this is just heartbreaking.
Well, and we should point out too, the other thing that he says to her about Salt Lake City is that there is no cure, that they gave up on it, that there are a bunch of people like her that they've encountered who is immune, and they just can't figure out how to make it work. And so they weren't even looking for a cure anymore, and in this day and age, there's no communications across the country. So, in Boston where they hadn't received that info yet. So he was still sent out on the mission to bring her in there because Boston thought they were still looking for immune people, and so, and again, so there's that also. So it's not just, how did I end up in, in the car in my gown? It's also, and by the way, the cure thing, don't even worry about it, because that isn't even a thing, and like you said, she knows that he's not being truthful, which is weird because up until that point in season 1, he was like almost truthful to a painful point with her.
Yeah, your
Yeah,
cargo.
you're a kid, look, you're not really family, so I don't have to, look after you like family. I'm just looking after you like cargo, and
Yeah,
now suddenly clearly he is not being truthful. And from his point of view, he's just like, look, I'm just trying to spare you, the
of
the the
course,
the,
of
the
course.
pain, right? That I made a call there that saved your life because I decided that you in the world is a better thing than possibly having a cure for all of humanity. So, which
Right,
is a lot to lay on anybody, especially like a 14-year-old.
right.
So, but yeah, so again, a very interesting way to begin the game, and that, like you said, we pick up immediately where, I mean, to the point where we rewind a little bit and we get that last moments of season one, and then we jump to the revengeful giraffes sequence. Um,
Revengeful giraffes. I like it.
and
The poor giraffes
oh,
are going to be, you know, connected with that. They don't have anything to do with
they
it. Poor
don't. They're
things.
just being giraffes in that scene.
Yeah.
But what was great is as soon as you saw them, you knew, oh, we must be back in Salt Lake City, right? You knew exactly
Yeah.
where that was taking place, and yeah. So again, it's a really interesting way, and like I said, much different. When we meet, when the game starts, I believe you start and you actually play as Abby. And her group, they're in or nearby Jackson, and it's wintertime and it's snowing and it is present day. And all we know is that they're looking for someone, for him, and they don't really say who him is at all. And Abby is clearly in charge, clearly leading the group, and clearly the one that has got the most bloodlust to get him. And I'm using air quotes here. And when you're playing, you're like, well, it's probably Joel, right? I mean, who else? You know what I mean? It's
it feels like it should be,
I'm
right?
guessing
Yeah.
it's a Joel you're looking for, And so anyway, that's kind of your introduction to Abby, and you don't really know who she is, what her background is, and
Right.
why is she on this bloodlust to get him. And I think they say, he's a smuggler, and so again, that also goes right to, well, I mean, that's clearly Joel, but anyway, it's much different here in that we get this little taste, this little tidbit of the aftermath back at the hospital, and what the survivors, or these people, maybe they were out on a patrol or they came in on a supply run or something, and when they show up, everybody's dead, the place is shot up,
Yeah.
and so they're just trying to put it together. And of course Abby feels very, very, someone there was very special and got killed, to her, and that is crossed the line, and now she is out to get Joel. And I wrote down, the line where, she agrees to go to Seattle and join up with this other group on the condition that then they're going to go out and get Joel and kill him. And then she said her line, she goes, slowly. When we kill him, we kill him slowly. And you're just like,
Yeah.
I believe you.
Yes, yes. I believe your convictions in this
Yes.
moment right now. Yeah. Yeah, just such a great, like, you're like, yeah, that's the kind of, like, revenge is tough because it's like people will, like, work through, like, being, like, hungry, going without, if with revenge in your heart, like, it'll eat them alive. It's interesting, and knowing what we know later in the episode, to know that she went 5 years and did not give
Right.
up, still was like a dog and a bone,
Yeah.
So it doesn't bode well that she was able to sort of let go and be okay
Be
with
able to
it.
move past it. Yeah. Yeah.
She did not move past it.
What is
yeah.
the line in Red Dawn, right? When Powers Booth is talking to I'm blanking on his name, the guy who turned up on Walking Dead there for a little while, and he's
C. Thomas
Thomas
Howell.
Howell, yes. And C. Thomas Howell is, he wants to kill as many of these, Russians as he can because they killed his dad. And Powers Booth looks at him and goes, all that hate's gonna burn you out inside. And C. Thomas Howell just looks back at him and goes, yeah, but it'll keep me warm. So, and again, a very similar kind of a thing here in that, like you said, I mean, this woman this, and you kind of get the sense there that Abby and Ellie are very close in age.
Yes.
That Abby may be a little bit older, maybe she's like 20, 21, 22.
Yep.
But still definitely in that age group where they could have been in high school together, right? And yet she is, holding on to this, whatever, this, wrong that's been inflicted on her, like you said, for 5 years. And she still is like, no, I go get him and he gonna suffer. So.
Yeah. Yes. Just like that. So we have the opening credits, we come back and we have our first, sort of establishing scene of the actual episode. And it's this really great, what turns out to be a training session for Ellie, this knockdown, drag out fight. But what's great about it is the way they film it. They did a really good job. Like, my first time through the episode, I thought it was the real thing, the real deal. But the second time through, I was watching it more closely, and you can kind of see the moments where Caleb is the name of the dude she's
very
fighting.
Large gentleman she was attempting to fight.
Yes. He did pull his punches a little. He did lean back or lay back just a little bit. You could see a little bit of it. But it's still, even with that, it's a brutal fight. She is, like, the final moment, she gets him in a leg lock around his neck, and he actually taps out. And she doesn't hear it and has to be, like, yelled at. And she's like, oh, sorry, whatever.
Lost in the moment.
Lost in the moment. You get the sense that that's not the first time that Ellie has, she's gone too far in whatever it is. And, we get snippets of that throughout the episode, with whether it's, doing, target practice, doing patrols, doing whatever it is. She is always doing a little bit extra, like more than she should, like going too far. Testing boundaries is her favorite thing.
Well, she's 19, right? She's at the height of rebelliousness, right? With the point where, you think you know it all and no one older than you could possibly shed any light on how to live life that would help you. So you have that, and then you have layered on top of it, or maybe underneath it, she has this idea of, you know what, I can kind of do whatever I want, because even if I get bit, it doesn't matter. And so,
which is so dangerous.
Yeah. I mean, because like we were talking about, yesterday, the infected people, clickers, or just the regular runner types, they might not be able to bite you and infect you and kill you, but they could still just kill you.
Yes, yeah. She was told by Tess way in the beginning, being immune doesn't save you from being torn apart.
Yeah.
To reference the, when they go on the patrol and see the bear. Something like what happened to the bear could still happen to her.
Oh, easily. And then, like I said, can I tell you, playing part 2, how many times playing as Ellie, I have died because a clicker is like bit me and ripped my throat out, okay? And like, restarting, okay. It does. It happens. And yet she sort of has that kind of arrogance of a teenager, with that extra layer of, see, even if the thing bit me on the arm or on my tummy or wherever, it doesn't matter. I'm fine. Nothing can touch me. Yeah.
It's a shame, because it's like in, normal teenagers, currently, like in this day and age, teenagers are known for, feeling like they can survive it all. They know the answers to it all. They're fine. They're impervious. Nothing's going to happen to them. And in day-to-day life, like we lead, it's foolhardy, but like, what are the worst things that could happen? For her,
yes, right.
she could get torn apart by an infected, and because she was just being too laid back about stuff.
Yeah.
So it's definitely it poses challenges and risks for her on a lot of levels.
Yeah, you know, she lives in a world where there are actual monsters roaming around, you know, that will kill you if they see you, and she still acts this way.
Right. Yeah, yeah. Ugh, God, teenagers. It's funny too because I thought about that. When I was watching the episode like the second time, I had an teenagers moment, and it made me think about watching World Beyond because that was our big thing, especially that first season. It got better. Second season was much better. People watch the second season. But in that first season, how many times did we just teenagers? You know, just the worst. Yeah. Sorry if you're a teenager, but you guys are the worst.
And then the other thing too about this scene is that when she finally relents and the fight is over and we're introduced to Jesse, who is, you know, like maybe like in his like early 20s, so he's a little bit older than, what did they say, he's 4 years older, so he's got to be 23, 24. And he clearly is in a leadership position in somewhat with the patrols and the you know the militia or whatever you want to call them. And you know, he's there and he's telling her, hey, you got to lighten up. And she's like, yeah, but I won. And then it comes out that Jesse had told Caleb to pull his punches. And he basically says, you would have lost because he hit you first right in the nose. And Ellie does have like a bloody nose when you see it. And he's like, if I didn't have him pull his punches, you would have been knocked out and the fight would have been over. And Ellie is just livid that they pulled his did not go full bore. Like she got some kind of special treatment. And that is a huge button, red button for her. That she just does not like this idea of anyone giving her anything, that, you know, taking it easy on her, that she is somehow, and I'm going to use air quotes here, special, right?
Yeah, she hates all of that.
Yes, and you know, I mean, as soon as she finds that out, you know, because when it immediately ends, she's kind of joking around and sort of like, yeah, man, I did really well, and you know, I got to do better, blah blah. And then the pulling punches comes out, and immediately she is very angry and puts on her coat and leaves, and she's like, you know, don't ever pull punches on me again, ever, you know. And it's just and literally like do not talk to me, get the F away from me, and just opens the door and like storms out of that barn, you know, just like, you know, screw all of you. So right away we find out these very important things, that Ellie is a teenager and extremely rebellious, clearly from things that are said in that scene has problem following the rules, no matter what the rules are. And thirdly, is very, you know, there's a lot of anger there. She's angry about something, and it bubbles to the surface very easily.
Yeah. I mean, and it's just such a direct tie to what she suspects Joel did something and did it, whatever it is that he did it to, you know, quote unquote, help her, or, you know what I mean? And she just doesn't want any of that. She doesn't want any of that. She wants to do things on her own. She wants to be independent. She doesn't want to have to rely on anyone. And it like soaks out of her. It's every fiber of her being that she's that way. It's a great scene, really establishing who Ellie is as a person for this season, like how she feels on the inside about all that kind of stuff. So great scene.
And we should also say too that before that scene starts, it does give us the super of we're jumping 5 years ahead. So now 14-year-old Ellie is like 19 going on 20-year-old Ellie. So she's had 5 years, just like Abby's had 5 years to, you know, not let go of the revenge thing. Ellie has had 5 years of whatever Joel lied to her about kind of festering and building in her. And so, like we said, on top of the fact that she's 19 and, you know, has all of the issues of a 19-year-old is going through under normal conditions. She's living in this nightmare world. And then on top of it, she has, you know, the one person that, you know, she thought she could trust no matter what has lied to her, and it just is eating her away.
Yeah. Yes. And speaking of Joel, when we get away from this scene, there's a real kind of quick scene with establishing that Joel is back to doing what he did pre-apocalypse. He's doing construction. He's being sort of tasked with that in Jackson, and he's supposed to be a foreman for this construction crew, but we get our first meeting with Dina, and she's on his construction crew, and she comes inside, and he's tinkering with some he's trying to rebuild some breaker boxes, and he's, sitting there at the table, and she comes inside and says, our foreman isn't foreman, so that's him, because he's, distracted by working on this little minutia of fixing the breaker boxes. But, we get to know who Dina is, and we get to sort of see how Joel is now, 5 years in the future. And I mean, the most important stuff that kind of comes out of that scene, there's a few things, but one of them is that Joel falls under the typical dad trope, which is Dina is apparently Ellie's best friend, and he ends up asking her, because she asks him first, what's up with Ellie, because she's obviously been in a bad mood or whatever, and he probes with Dina. I figured you would know what's going on, and da-da-da. So just a typical dad thing to be like, ask the friend, what's going on with her? She doesn't talk to me, blah, blah, blah. And even when it gets to the point later in the conversation when Dina's trying to sort of pivot away, he's like, yeah, because, I didn't do anything wrong, and da-da-da. And you're like, it's getting a little cringy right now. Yeah, so there's that. And also in his conversation with Dina asks him if he's in therapy. There's a therapist who's in the town now, and he's like, don't tell anybody. And it's like, okay, she's clearly going to tell a few people. But yeah, so those are some important things. Joel's doing the construction again. Dina's a part of his crew, so he's both, it seems like he's got a better relationship with Dina than he does with Ellie right now.
Oh yeah.
And then things aren't going well with Ellie. They're not getting along, and he's in therapy.
Yeah. Trying to figure out a way to deal with it. Yeah. As he points out, Dina treats him like a human being. Dina says hello to him, and just does those little things, right? And we should also point out, too, that the reason why Dina comes in to see him, because he's inside this house that they're, like, rehabbing, is that the crew is outside and they've dug up, like, the sewage line running from the house to the sewer, and it has all these roots in it, which is very common. I mean, it's a thing that happens. You have to come and root them out, right? And you get the big roto-rooter type things, and you run them in there and drill them, and kind of break them all up and so on. But she goes in to get him because the crew is kind of like, we're not really sure what we're supposed to do. And as you said, she points out that, we would normally ask the foreman, but the foreman isn't really foremaning right now. And he's just like, yeah, I'm sorry. But, from his standpoint, he's like, they were going to throw away this whole circuit breaker box. And when all it is the actual breakers just need to be rewired and given new springs and stuff, and you can save all of it, And you have to wonder, at some point, right, in this world, you can't throw away everything. You have to try and, wouldn't you think you'd have to try and save and reuse as much as you can, and as we're going to find out in a few scenes, the Jackson is, more and more refugees are turning up every day, and they're running out of places to put them. And so building more housing is like number one on their priority list. And so, that's going to make housing supplies even that much harder to get new ones and unopened, unused type stuff. And so, I totally get where Joel's coming from there, where he's like, yeah, I should be out there kind of overseeing what you're doing, but this is important too. And so, but you're right. And she asks him first of like, what's wrong with you and Ellie? Why are you guys having problems? And he kind of answers a little, and then she immediately is like, okay, I'm going to try and get out of this conversation now and swing it back to work. And then you're right. He's like, here's what I don't understand. And suddenly he's asking her, and she's just like, oh, this was a mistake.
Yeah. If I could go back to 5 minutes ago, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also the
So,
roots in the
yeah.
drain pipe is going to come back and
Oh,
and
yeah.
sort of,
Big time.
kind of bite us in the butt a little later on too. So
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Um, we sort of pivot from Joel asking about Ellie to an actual Ellie scene, and we get this really great scene with Ellie and Tommy. And I really enjoyed the scene a lot because it gives you sort of this peek into a different relationship, which is, we spent all of last season sort of waiting for Tommy. Like, he's in the first episode, but then we don't see him again until the end. And to see him, he has his own relationship with Ellie that's, different from Joel. And, he's like an adopted uncle of sorts, and that's his sort of adopted niece, and they have like a playfulness, etc. And he's just sort of trying to teach her and trying to, school her, but ultimately he still is like the cool uncle, and he relents in the end because, he's trying to, you know, discipline her by saying, she's taken off of patrols for a little bit because of, behavior issues, and she's being put on like fence duty. And obviously, fence duty sounds just as exciting as it probably is. So, Ellie is all pissed off, and, Dina does the same thing. You're not taking her off. And then when Tommy makes it clear that it's Joel asked to take her off, and she again,
oh yeah, no, don't treat me any differently.
Yeah, exactly. That's her big number one thing. So she gets angry, and Tommy is just trying to be the messenger here. And he basically, there's a great line in that scene where he's talking about Joel to Ellie, and he says, "I've been dealing with him my whole life. Sometimes it's easier to just go along." So basically, like, even if you don't agree with what we're trying to do here, with you doing like the fence duty,
just do it.
Joel's kind of pushy, and eventually, if you just do what he says, it'll be a little bit easier maybe for
right.
you.
Well, because you got to live with this person, and
Exactly.
Yeah, and then when she continues to just rail him to get him to relent, and he finally does, and he literally says something like, "I swear you and Joel are the same gosh damn person."
Yeah, exactly. That's a good line,
which is, again, very it gives you another little glimpse into why are they having problems. Well, because it's basically one person talking to themselves.
Right.
Yeah, that scene was really fun, and I think we should point out too that the secret immunity club has
Yes.
3 members that we know of, and that's Ellie, obviously, and Joel, and then Tommy knows, because I think they told Tommy in season 1 when they first showed up there. But that's kind of it, and Joel has clearly made it very emphatically to Ellie that do not tell people that you're immune, because we do not know how they will react to you, right? And it's very possible that if it gets out, she'll be banished, because the townsfolk are like, well, she's immune now, but what if she wakes up tomorrow and she's an infected person, and we have an infected person inside the wall? You know what I mean? So you never know. You never know what their reaction is going to be. So it's like, do not tell anyone. It's like Fight Club, right? And Tommy is part of that group, which I think it helps make him like she has a special relationship, a bond with him, similar to Joel, in that like they're all privy to this like thing that no one else really knows,
Right.
And of course, when he brings it up, she starts screaming at the top of her lungs, "I'm immune!"
Yeah.
She's just, again, because she's a rebellious teenager, and she's like, "I could get bit 1,000 times," all this stuff, and he's just like, "Will you shut up?" And so it just, again, I think it's a fun way for them to kind of bring up the idea of like, clearly they do not want this to be public. Do not tell anyone. Do not tell anyone. Do not tell anyone. The other thing I loved about this scene is that this is one of those bits that they lifted right out of the game. Which is the shooting with the sniper rifle, and in the game, interestingly enough, it does not happen right away. It happens like closer to about midway through the game, and it's a flashback sequence in the game where you go back, maybe 2 years earlier. So Ellie is like 16, 17, and much better relationship with Joel, not nearly on the skids as much as present day is. And it's in the summertime. It's not the wintertime, but you are up on this hill, and I think they are near the ski lifts, because I remember the chairs are there, right? That you use to get up the top of the hill, and it's basically you have a rifle in the game, and eventually at this point, about midway through, you have the ability to add a scope to it. And so the game, this is just a gamey thing. It gives you a chance, the player, to kind of practice using the scope in a non-lethal situation. And so you're up on this hill. The infected are way over on another hill. There's no direct way for them to get to you. You have unlimited ammo because it's Tommy's rifle, so you're not wasting the few bullets that you have in the current game, because all the resources are very hard to come by. You're always scrounging around looking for extra bullets and extra first aid kits and all that kind of stuff, right? And so here, this gives you a chance to use the gun, and just like Tommy says in the episode, they're so far away, the targets, that you have to aim above them because the bullet's going to drop and all that stuff, and so you get to kind of do that and figure out how to use the gun in the game, so that when you're back in the game playing for real, you don't have to futz around with how does this work and all that stuff. So I really like that they incorporated that scene. I was a little surprised that they put it when they did right away, but yeah, it still was it was fun, and again, one of those little Easter egg moments for the game players. So
what a little treat to sort of find out about that, because to me, a lot of these things they've lifted directly from the game. This is just like an extra layer for people to feel like they're really, really doing a good service to the game by these sort of direct lifts. But you're able to also take scenes that, like, in the game, maybe it doesn't add anything to the story, but you can take a scene like that and then build a scene around it, and have it make absolute sense. And I just think that just shows how good they are at crafting this story to take something that would, game players would recognize right away and it would mean something to them. And they created a scene out of it that it's an important scene.
It
really establishes, all of the things about, Ellie fighting for her independence and things like that, and railing against Tommy being Joel's mouthpiece and whatever, and Tommy's just trying to be liked here and all of that, and it's a really great scene. And to be able, they could have done this anywhere. This could have happened out on the street. This could have happened, he could have bumped into her as soon as she comes out of the
barn,
the stable or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, they could have done anything, but the fact that they chose to take something that was otherwise, not a very necessary moment, just like a sort of training thing, and then build the scene around it and have it mean something that's just fantastic. Such great storytelling and craftsmanship to put it together like that.
It's interesting because as I was replaying the game, over the last 10 days or so, one of the things I kind of kept an eye out for was moments that I thought, ooh, that would be a good thing that they could put into the series. Or that exchange, and not just necessarily the cutscenes because there are, just like in the first game, there are incredible dramatic cutscene moments in the game, right, where you're watching them and they're acting and and it's depressing or exciting or whatever, where you're like, yeah, that'll probably be in there. But just like little moments that happen, when you're playing the game, where there'll be offhanded comments that the characters will make when they find graffiti on the wall or whatever, and I was just kind of consciously watching for those little things and thinking, yeah, that I could see them pulling that and using that. And for that flashback scene with Tommy and the sniper rifle, I thought it'd be interesting to see how could they use it, because in the game it's just to use the rifle. That's it. And like you said, they took that and then they added and crafted into it actually very important story information to keep the story moving forward. And just like you said, shows how damn creative they are.
Yeah, it's great. We then go to a really great scene after the sniping scene, sort of a, like, I want to call it kind of like world building, but it's this like otherwise kind of boring, civic minded, it's, Maria is looking out the window, seeing some more refugees coming in, and she's talking to Joel about the pace of building houses and getting housing for people, and he's telling her, I can only move so fast. I need supplies and things like that. And
well,
it's slow going.
He does reference the constructo meter.
Yes,
right, which is just
a very important part of all of it.
Yes, it's just the dial. You just turn it up if you want us to go faster. And yeah, he does. He points out that literally he's short of everything. He doesn't have enough supplies, doesn't have enough people, and he clearly doesn't have enough time. And and he points out, they want to like redo the roofs of like the school and the church or something, or the library or something. And he's like, you want that by spring, and I just doubt we'll be able to get it by summer. And that's if we, don't try and build more housing, which you now say you need. So literally, they're coming to him with more, and he's sort of like, there's only so much that we can do.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's this great scene where it also, it's interesting because if you think about the current political environment, it's this interesting sort of moment between Joel and Maria where, Joel's basically saying, we can't take in everybody. It's, we got to take care of our own. When Maria's trying to make a play for, it's we're stronger. It's who we are. We take people in, and she even gets the last line in and makes a really good point. At the end of the scene, once, the couple other things happen, at the end of the scene, as Joel's leaving, she reminds him, Joel, you were a refugee too. And it's true. And it makes him think about it. And the thing is that both of them are right. Maria is right. We need to be bringing people in. We need to be the place that accepts refugees. And the stuff that's unsaid there is obviously we're ultimately stronger the more people we have here. One more person on the inside is one less person on the outside of the wall that could get bit and turn into an infected. So, the whole point is to rebuild society back to where it was, or to some semblance of it. Then to do that, you need to actually have people to make that society.
Yeah.
But it's also, Joel is also correct. If their resources are spread too thin, then that means everyone suffers. So he's just being careful about those resources, and he has a direct connection to those resources, and he knows how hard it is. Like, he's talking about needing to use more, window caulk to be able to get the, she made a comment in the scene about how the window isn't keeping out the cold anymore, and he needs to use more window caulk, and he's like, I need more, but then I can't use it on new houses, etc. So it's like, think about the supply of that.
Yeah.
Like, we're 20 years in at this point. So, are they making their own? Are they creating some? Do they have like access to a really big Home Depot from, 20 years ago but we don't know, but he knows that some of the supplies that are very necessary are limited, and he's trying to make sure that he's spreading them out appropriately. So there's moments there, she makes her comment, you were a refugee, but he also is like, well, we're trying to build these houses. If I'm building these houses, I'm not fixing the roof in the library. I'm not fixing the window in your office, which is cold, and it's in the middle of winter right now. So it's like they both make good arguments for both sides of that, and it's difficult to fall on one side or the other. It's you're really sort of left with a position of, they're both smart, they both have passion for their argument, and neither one of them is wrong. They both have really good points to raise there. So I really liked it. It's a quiet scene. It's a quick scene, but it says a lot in that moment.
Yeah, it does. And I think it close where Joel, after she says, you were a refugee too, doesn't he say something like, I'd take them all in if I could?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So Joel, like, clearly his heart's in the right place, but his brain is telling him, we have to prioritize something here because we can't be everything to everyone. There just isn't enough.
Yes. And that's the whole point of that scene. We can't be everything to everyone. And I don't think they came to a resolution.
No.
I think they really did a good job of showing each other the other side of the argument.
Sure.
To sort of say, you may be right, but I'm also right, and you may be right, but I'm also right.
And I think that her son comes in who's like 8, and jumps on Uncle Joel's lap, and he shows him the map, and it's fun, but it's also very scary in that he's like, what's this? And the kid's like, that's the town. And then there's a big red line. It's like, what's that? It's like, that's the wall. And he goes, and what's out here? And the kid's like, monsters, and so and you're like, yeah, and he's not wrong, and then Tommy comes in and basically, kind of goes, what's going on in here? And Joel's like, oh, your wife wants me to work faster. And he's like, did you mention the big knob? So Tommy also worked in construction back in the before time. He has heard the joke of the constructo meter as well. So, probably used it many times himself. But you're right. That kind of interrupts the serious talk, and Joel has to go to therapy anyway. So he leaves. So yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk that therapist scene. Yeah. First of all, Catherine O'Hara. Let's just. She's
awesome, right? Yeah, she's awesome, and I should point out this scene completely new, not in the game at all. And I know you are just jonesing to know what happened to Eugene, who is her husband.
Yes.
And just let me tell you from a game standpoint, and I think if you watch the featurette, I think Craig Mazin, either Mazin or Druckmann talk about it a little bit, but in the game, one of the things that happens is as you're walking around and you're looking for supplies, you're opening cabinets and you're looking underneath beds and behind stuff and all this, and you find stuff tucked away all over the place. You periodically find like notes that are there, and you can read them, and lots of times they're clearly from people that are long gone, and it's like hey, you know what, I had to go try to get some water, so I put all of our stuff in the usual place, and hopefully I'll be back. And then that tells you as the game player that, okay, somewhere around here is a whole bunch of supplies, I just gotta find it, and
right.
And in the game early on, you find, and I think you're playing as Ellie, you find these notes. You find Gail, and she's dead. And there are notes there that she's like, Eugene went to the hospital to get medical supplies for me. I'm sorry that I got sick. It's my fault. And, he's been gone way too long, and I think something's happened to him. And then later on, you find in a different building, I think you find an infected person, and when you kill them, on them is a note that you can read, and it's Eugene, and he's basically saying, I went to go get medical stuff for my wife, and I got bit, and I don't have it in me to kill myself, and so I'm so sorry, and I hope she recovered, that kind of thing. So Gail and Eugene are in the game, but we never actually meet them as people. We kind of meet Eugene very, very briefly, and you do have to kill Eugene, which of course is what Gail is so pissed at Joel about. So, but anyway, this scene, like I said, is not there. There's no therapy for Joel in the game. So, Joel just has to soldier through on his own.
it's interesting because I did write it in my notes that I do want to know the story of why Joel had to kill her husband, because it, comes out in the scene clearly. But I mean, him turning, becoming infected is definitely, that makes the most sense of why he would kill someone and still be able to sort of like move around the town and not be in trouble for it. And it didn't even dawn on me at the time. I was mostly just like, oh my God, how is this a thing? But even so, like there were the game circumstances of the, going to get supplies or going to get something for his wife. And obviously if they've made her the therapist and made her like a speaking character, etc. And I wonder if they're going to follow, if they're going to just do something different. Like, yes, maybe he does get infected, so he does have to get killed or put down. But I'm curious if there are different circumstances on how that happened. Like, was it an accident, or, was he out foraging for stuff, or, it's interesting. Maybe he, was infected and came close to Ellie, and that's why, like, maybe he did something really brutal when he killed him, and it's,
Well, she does, in the scene, she does say that, that he killed her husband, and it's not just that he killed her, but it's the way he did it. She says something like that, which, again, you're right. What does that mean? And I agree with you. The Occam's razor here is that clearly Eugene became infected and attacked Joel or Ellie or Tommy, and Joel just did what you do when you run into an infected person, and he probably didn't even know who he was, right? And then after the fact, oh yeah, that was my husband, and just like in Walking Dead, right? How many times in The Walking Dead did Rick's group encounter people that, even though their parents, spouses, children were dead and reanimated, they kept them around, locked in a back room somewhere, right? It's just letting go is a lot harder to do in reality than it is to say you're going to do. And, even though intellectually Gale knows that he was infected and it wasn't him anymore, and that he basically died, the person she knew, he was still there, and he was still moving, and there's always a chance. What if we found a way to fix him, or you know what I mean? And like in all those people that were in the barn in season 2 of Walking Dead, it was we're keeping them there because eventually we're going to come up with a way to fix them. Totally glossing over the fact that they are dead, but still, that was the belief, right? That's what he believed was going to happen. And so it's not an unusual trope, but it's one that it's totally emotional, right? There's no rational thought behind it. It's just like, what did she say? This is her birthday, and it's the first one in 41 years that she hasn't spent with her husband. So you know what? Yeah, she still misses him.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's just, it's so sad. It's funny too, because when the first time I watched the episode and he comes in to her place, and she's like, oh, go ahead and sit down. I'm getting something to drink. Do you want, and she's like, do you want coffee, or I've got whiskey, whatever. And when he looks down and he looks at the boots, and she still has Eugene's boots out. And now I know, like the second time through, the scene made more sense. At first I was like, is he here to see the therapist, and she's like, got a man in the back or something like that. Or, like, I wasn't sure what that meant looking down at the boots. Or
was there another person having therapy and finishing up there? And you're right. And she's like, he's like, you got tea? And what does she say? It's like mostly like sticks and dirt or something. And then she's like, whiskey, let's just do whiskey, and then
thistles and dirt.
Thistles and dirt. Yeah, that's it. And so he's like, she's drinking, and he's like, I didn't think therapists could do that, and she's just like, literally has the, who's gonna turn me in, right? And who are they gonna turn me into? It's like, I'm like the last therapist on the planet here. I can do whatever the hell I want.
Yeah. Yeah. And that scene is just, it was so surprising and so, because even though this wasn't a game thing, like it did not. If you were to list the top 10 things that would happen in a scene where the therapist comes in to talk to Joel,
Mm-hmm.
this is not one of them.
No.
Like, you killed my husband and whatever, because she's ultimately, within the scene, she is frustrated with Joel because Joel is dealing with a teenager and things aren't changing, and she's like, your problem is boring.
Yeah, the most
And you're
boring
like,
problem that anyone's ever had. Yeah, like
yeah.
she opens up her book to take notes, and he starts, and you get the sense that like this is like maybe his 5th or 6th session, so they've been doing this for like maybe a month at least now, and he just goes right into she doesn't talk to me, she won't even treat me like a person, and Dina on the other hand, and after like he goes for a little bit, she kind of closes the book and just sets it down, and it's just like, oh God, and literally she's like, look, we got to do something different because I'm tired of hearing about your boring problem. And he's like, what? And she's like, what did he say? Like, I thought you would validate me. And so she's like, no, I'm not, because you're experiencing a problem every dad has experienced ever, but then the scene becomes very real and very, very, serious in that she goes, you're lying to me, Joel, and I've been around enough people doing this that I can tell, and until you tell me whatever it is you're not telling me, nothing's going to change.
Right.
And of course, we know what it is, we know the secret, and Joel is just like, I can't go there, I can't, he doesn't say that, but that's how he's acting. And so then she goes, she's like, I have to tell you something, and I know I shouldn't, but I'm gonna. And at this point, Joel kind of realizes that she's been drinking a lot before he got there. So,
Yes.
so she is very, very, well lubricated at this point and has a lot of liquid courage. And she literally
Yes.
tells him that she hates him. And it's just like, I can't, stand you, and you killed my husband, and here you are sitting in my house drinking my whiskey, and it makes me sick. And and he and I mean, literally Joel is going hamana hamana hamana, he doesn't know what to do, and then she gets done with it, and she goes, there, it's out in the open, I can't take it back, but now that it's out there, now I can try and work and get your friendship back and make amends for doing that, for saying this awful thing. And as painful as it was and personal for her, you understand the tactic she's taken. She's like, look, see, I just revealed something secret that I would never tell you, or I shouldn't have told you, but I did.
Right.
And now I can move past it because it's out. And it's in the open.
Yeah.
So whatever it is that you did, tell me, tell me, what did you do to her? And then, she asked, did you do something to her? And he nods yes. And then she goes, did you hurt her? And he literally starts crying. I mean, he is so emotional. And I love the way they film it, because he stands up very suddenly, and the camera stays, at as if he was still sitting down. So his hand is kind of right in the center of the screen, and his hand almost becomes a fist. It's like moving to fist position. and literally, I mean, so he's getting very emotional, and then he just, says very quietly, I saved her. And then he, just like Ellie, storms out of there. And is done. And it was a very, very surprising scene. Again, not from the game, so I did not think I had no idea it was coming, just like everyone else. And I was just like, whoa. So when obviously you coming into it without knowing who she is, and again, I mean, not that I really did either, but when she started going into all of the, I hate you for what you did, what was your reaction? What were you thinking when that was going on?
At first I was like, because she was like, your thing is boring, your problems are boring, which is true. It's very, like she even says, she's like, oh my God, your teenage daughter hates you. Oh my God, you're so abnormal.
Stop the presses.
So at first, and when she admits that she had, this wasn't her first whiskey, I just thought she was being sarcastic at first.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think that she was being serious about hating him. And as it progressed and it became clear that she was being honest, and that she was being honest because she wanted him to be honest with her too.
Yes.
She was like, I'm revealing this to you. She doesn't think she's going to be able to get anything out of him about killing her husband, because I think, it seems like it was an infected moment.
Mm-hmm.
But so he probably had no choice and had to do what he had to do. So she's not going to get like an apology about it or whatever. But I think in that moment of revealing like how she really feels, she probably was hoping that he would be honest with her. Like, I'm telling you something that I would never, and just to sort of shake your tree to see what falls loose. And I think in that moment when he stands up and when he says, I saved her, and I don't think that's what she was expecting to hear.
No.
I think, you know what I mean? Like, I was expecting him to say something like that because I know how he feels very self-righteous about that moment. He feels like he did the right thing. He didn't do anything wrong. But I think in her eyes, she was expecting something. I don't know what she was expecting, but she was not expecting him to sort of, like, he's fully expecting to die on this hill. He doesn't think he did anything wrong, the thing that he's hiding, and he is prepared to, like, never say anything about it. It upsets him because he's crying, and I think all of that coupled together just, like, knocked her sideways. I don't think she was expecting any of that moment to happen. Which is why in that moment, she doesn't say a word and he just leaves.
Yeah.
The thing that I think I'm most curious about is, after this and then, his behavior in like the final scene, the dance moment, I'm curious if he's going to continue going to therapy.
Yeah.
Because clearly he still needs therapy to work through his problems, but he's obviously not going to tell her that big problem.
Well, maybe he will. Maybe he will. I think if he does decide he's going to go back to therapy, he's going to have to, do better than just giving her stems and seeds. I mean, that was not kosher for him. I mean, she's like, what am I in high school here? When he hands her the payment for her session is like a little like baggie full of weed.
Yeah. Oh my God. And the weed. I love that weed is still currency.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's the ultimate. Like you can grow it at home and it can go to somebody, 'cause that's the way it used to be. I can't pay you to help me move, but I can give you a couple bags of pot,
Hey, you want to help me with my term paper? I'll give you a bag of weed. Yep. I mean, it's yeah, it's a plant that does not. It's an idiot plant. You have to, it'll grow.
You don't have to do anything. Yeah.
So it's very easy to grow and it grows everywhere. I mean, yeah, it makes total sense that would be currency, particularly for, the younger folk or the more liberal folk like clearly, Gail is,
Yeah.
So yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm right there with you where, I'm wondering, particularly in the dance scene, which we'll get to, one of the shots they give us is Gail is there in the background, just kind of observing the whole thing. And so you wonder, is he going to continue therapy with her? And is she eventually going to get him to admit, what's going on?
I feel like there's got to at least be one more scene of those two together, because otherwise they wouldn't have spent the time to have her in the dance scene observing.
Yeah.
She's going to take what she saw there, plus what he gave to her with the I saved her, and put it all together and have another moment with him. Whether it doesn't necessarily have to be him getting therapy. It could just be a confrontation somewhere. But I think they're going to have at least one other scene together based on that.
Yeah.
But I'm curious if it's a therapy scene or I'm going to tell you you're fucking stupid out in the middle of the street scene.
Yeah.
And whatever works, whatever type of therapy works. For
and also too, they wouldn't have cast O'Hara if it was a character that was in one scene,
absolutely.
So, at least you would think normally they wouldn't do that, So that clearly when they spent the money to get her, it's to have her appear in the show more than just, for like 6 minutes. So yeah, I would imagine, I would hope we will see her again. And I'm, like I said, this is non-game territory, so I'm just like you. I want to see where it's going to go.
No, it's
Uh-huh.
I'd say like there's two really big set piece scenes in this episode. There's lots of great moments, great scripted moments, but I think the two set piece scenes are, of course, Ellie scenes, and the dance is one of them, as sort of an inciting incident, as it were. But really, the big action set piece of the whole episode is the patrol scene. And, it starts out innocently enough. Dina turns out is going on the same patrol. And we get this really sweet scene where she goes to pick her up and bring her. And, they're running late, which seems like it's something that happens a lot of the time, to go meet up with the others. And, Ellie's trying to get her coat and her holster and everything. And Dina's helping, let me get that for you. And you can see in that moment on Ellie's face that she is absolutely infatuated with Dina and doesn't know what to do. Like, Dina's probably the person she's closest to, and she is like almost frozen in that moment. You could see it on her face. She's like, I'm close and I could kiss her. I can smell her right now.
There.
Like, yeah. And we've been there. We've been in that moment where the person who's like your crush is either close to you or near you, and you're like, I don't know what to do. Like, all of a sudden you're like, I don't know what to do with my face, with my hands, with my body. Right. Like, how do I make myself look really cool so you'll want to be with me? And she's just going through all of that on her face and doesn't know what to do. She's almost frozen. And then it's like, okay, time to go. Let's go. And she's like, okay.
Yes, like, moment over.
What just happened here?
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah. I don't remember anything after when you knocked. I mean, just.
Yeah, exactly. So they go meet up with the crew together. There's a really funny scene where, as we mentioned, Jesse appears to be like either in charge of some of the small patrols like that, or he has some type of supervisory position where he's one of the people in charge of, sort of delegated to give them instruction, tell them where they're going, what they're doing that day. They have a whole flag system for, being able to let the people know, are things good or are things bad? Like, there's a special color system, and which is good. That's good security. And in that moment, like, both Dina and Ellie end up like making comments and making fun of Jesse in the moment, and you have the sense that they've done this 100 times before. They've made fun of him in front of others. And when they go to leave, Jesse has a moment where he tells them, like, could you just like try to take it a little seriously? And his main reason, he doesn't really even care about himself in that moment. He could care less. His main reason is the others look up to you for some reason. And for some reason. And basically, he's like, they're looking to you for guidance, right, and you guys are like the clown show. And this is serious stuff. People can be put at risk. And the other thing, too, is he's basically saying these people are not as good at this as you are. And they they are at more risk than you are because they're not as good at this. And you need to be more aware, more mindful of that, you know? And they sort of take in that information, and, you know, there are rules. They're supposed to, you know, if there's more than they can handle, they're supposed to come back. And, you know, if it's something that needs to be investigated by a larger patrol, they're supposed to come back, and they'll send out a larger group of people, probably, you know, more well armed than these guys are, and they'll do something a little, you know, a larger scale. But, you know, when they arrive upon the carnage, as it were, they're debating whether or not, you know, is this a big enough deal to be able to stop the patrol, go back, get someone, because it's basically a bear that's been sort of, you know, gutted and torn apart, and there are body parts strewn about. And they clearly have come upon, they're there, like, it's post-carnage. You know, whatever happened is over. And it's clear that, you know, some infected came upon a bear, and the bear stood his ground and tore apart a bunch of the infected, but also ended up getting mortally wounded as well. And what's great about the way this scene is done, too, is also, this is wintertime, and there's snow everywhere, so the red of the blood is just so much more stark. It's so pronounced in this scene and makes such an impact. What were your thoughts when you, like, I'm curious, like, does this resemble anything in the game, or was this scene sort of something new for you to see as well?
No, this is, you know, straight out of the game. You know, the you come upon, I can't remember, it might have been a moose. And like when she's shooting the sniper rifle, like a licker is like eating like a moose carcass, if you remember, and she does a headshot and, you know, and kills it. And so I can't remember in when they come upon the scene, the carnage scene, if it's a bear or a moose. But yeah, you do see that, and there's blood all over the snow, and there's blood, you know, trails leading away, and there are there's probably like 4 or 5 infected bodies ripped apart all over the place, kind of around the bear and or the you know, the animal. And so yeah, that sequence is right there. That just in the, you know, where the game is different but similar is that Ellie and Dina go out on patrol, but when they go out on patrol, they go out by themselves, just the two of them, and there are 2 other people that are going out on a patrol on a different route, and those 2 people are Joel and Tommy. So it's a, you know, a much different setup. The whole idea that they're with these 3 other people, and the captain is Kat, and, you know, as we kind of find out in the conversation, Ellie dated Kat for a while because, as Dina puts it to her, Kat is, and I'm going to use air quotes here, the other one.
Which I've been down that road before. I understand.
And,
Diana, you know, it's always the thing, you know. Oh, my niece, you know, she lives in Chicago too. She's gay. Do you know her?
Yes.
And you're like, yes, absolutely.
She comes to all the meetings.
She comes to all the meetings.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right. But the other interesting thing about that scene is that they're kind of making small talk about, hey, are you going to go to the dance? Because we find out it's like New Year's Eve, and there's some kind of big shindig that's going to go on, you know, for the whole town, kind of a thing. And so Dina's like, are you going to go? And she's like, yeah, I don't know, maybe. And it's like, are you going to bring anyone? And she's like, no. And then that's when Dina brings up, well, you could ask, you know, go with Kat, because, you know, she's, again, air quotes, the other one. And we find out that Ellie and Kat were an item for a little while previously, but not anymore. And so then Dina kind of looks at her and goes, oh, you like someone. You know, you have your eye on someone, don't you? And of course, you know, Ellie is mortified, right? And it's just like, no, that's completely not true. But anyway, so again, it's kind of setting up what's going to happen at the dance. But then they notice that the 3 other folks have stopped riding, and so they are like considerably behind. So then they ride up to them, and there's just this big, you know, blood stain in the snow. and then the blood trail goes further in the direction that they're going. And at that point, Kat is like, we should go back. With this, whatever this is, they could be a whole horde. We don't know. And there's all kinds of footprints and stuff in the snow too, right? So it's not just the blood, but and literally Ellie and Dina just look at her and then just ride on ahead. And they're kind of like, no, we're reconning. This is what we're doing. We recon, So right away, they're breaking all the promises they made of they will follow the rules. They'll listen to the captain. They'll, do what they're told. No. So then they come upon the bear and it's all ripped to shreds. And this is where it's straight out of the game. But again, in the game, it's just the two of them. There's nobody else with them. And
Right.
They do, it's right next to the supermarket. And again, the supermarket is identical. The signage, the green paint, everything is exactly like it appears in the game. And they go into the supermarket, much like they do in the episode. And it's a very gamey thing, by the way, to jump on top of a car or a truck and then jump onto you jump on the hood, then you jump onto the roof, and then you can get to the roof of a building or a balcony or something.
Right.
Very gamey thing that they do right there. That's also another neat little Easter egg. And, they, of course, Kat's like, we shouldn't go in there. And they're just like, yeah, we're going in there, and they just ignore whatever she says. Right. And I think doesn't one of the guys that's with her goes, are you just going to let them do that? And Kat's like, well, give him 5 minutes.
Yeah. And you feel like this conversation has happened 100 times before.
Exactly.
This situation has happened 100 times before.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, right. And so they go in and they kind of determine that there's at least 2 infected inside. And we should point out that there's blood that went up the truck, onto the truck roof, and then onto the building and in through a window. So they know that at least one of the infected people got back into the supermarket that way. And the supermarket, all the doors on the ground level are all barricaded shut, and there's no way for them to get in that way, right? Mm-hmm. And so they go in there, and I just love this little moment where Ellie and Dina are kind of communicating using hand gestures and stuff about what they're going to do. And Dina's, they've each got their knives out because they're going to do it quiet. And Dina's kind of pointing at herself and I'm going to go around the corner. And she's a little walking thing with her fingers. And then she puts a knife up to her throat and does the, thing. And then she looks at Ellie and says, you pick up this beer bottle that's right here and you throw it and that'll attract the one. And then you can stab it. And then Ellie starts stabbing her neck and going, it's just a real fun little scene where you clearly get the sense that these two work really well together and they're very close and so on. And so they do it. And she, we don't really see Dina kill her person, but we see Ellie, and Ellie, of course, it's a clicker that is the one she gets. And we know from season 1 that clickers are just a pain in the ass. She throws the beer bottle, and then when the clicker senses her and starts turning towards her, she charges at it and jumps on its back and is just stabbing it in the head with her switchblade over and over and over again. It's intense. It's an intense kill. And again, we know she can't get infected, but like you said, like Tess said, they could still seriously hurt or kill you if they, really get a hold of you. So it was a very, very intense little moment there. What was your thoughts about when they basically go in there with no knowledge of what could be in there, right? There could be 100 infected in there for all they know, right?
Right. I think they do. As they're entering, you can see they are smart. Like Jesse's right. They're smart. They have good instincts. Because before they even step in, they listen at the window. They listen to hear noises and whether they can hear anything moving around. They get inside, they do the same, and that's how they suss out that they think that there's probably 2. So they split. So I'll take this one, you try and take that one. And like you said, we don't see Dina take down hers, but we see Ellie do hers. And like you're saying, the brutality of her jumping on and just, it was so quick, so fast, so intense. And like you're saying, the the clickers, like we found out in season 1, they are a pain in the ass, and a lot of it is because all of that, the cordyceps and all of everything growing out of their face and growing on their head, it's like a helmet.
Yeah.
You know, so it makes it hard to get through. So Ellie jumping on the back is actually kind of smart because she's able to sort of attack at the soft parts, the softer parts of, you know, while she is aiming for the head.
Mm-hmm.
See what I did
I
there?
do see what you did there.
Yeah. So it's intense and it's scary, but it's also kind of smart, you know, like attacking from behind like that, and she jumps up on it. It can't bite her or reach her from there. Not that biting her is even a fear of hers, but she's able to be in control in that moment, and she can stab away while you know, this clicker is trying to like fight her off, and she has the upper hand in this fight pretty much the whole time. But it's quick, it's intense, it's so great right off the bat. And it's great because, you know, now with distance of having watched the scene a couple of times, it's great. And when they're finished, you know, they both have like a sigh of relief, like, this is great, like, you know, it doesn't appear to be anything else in the building, we cleared it out. And then they're standing there, and you're like, okay, that's our nice action sequence for the episode. And then the floor gives way, and she ends up, you know, because they're up on like an upper floor, and she ends up on like the ground floor, like the first floor.
She's like in the grocery store proper.
Yes. And it's great because like in that moment, you know, Dina's like, are you okay? She's like, I'm fine. She just sort of like bumps and bruises. And Dina's like, well, I can't reach you from there. And I need to like sort of scout out like stairs or another entrance, like to be able to get to you. And she's like, stay right there. Famous last words, stay right there. And she's like, She's like, Ellie, stay right there. And she's like, And as soon as she's out of sight, you're like, okay, she's obviously got to walk around. So it's, again, more of Ellie being Ellie, which I feel like this whole episode was kind of like a recurring theme of Ellie being Ellie. And I just want to say, like, as she's walking around and we get that image of the little, as I called it, the feral child clicker. Although it's not a full clicker, we get like images, like once we see the face, there's like, you could still see eyes. So it was like in the midst of its transformation. Yeah. You know, there were a lot of cordyceps coming out of the head, but, you know, the eyes were still there, and like you said, the nose as well. And,
well, the nose had kind of rotted off, and coming out of like the opening where the nose would be, like on the skull, you see the fibers of the cordyceps, and as it's like closing in on Ellie from behind, though, they're like coming out and like pulsating and stuff. It's a really cool, really cool visual. And the in the game they call them stalkers, and they're like the new monster in the game that you have to deal with. You know, that it's not, they, you know, part 2, they didn't just throw all the stuff from part 1 again. They did, I mean, they're all there, but then they added these guys, and yeah, they're just in the game, they're so much a pain in the ass, because just like in that scene, they don't do what all the other ones do. You know, you make a noise, they don't come running out to see what made it. They hide, and they crouch around corners and stuff. And like I was telling you before, one of the things in the game you can do is you push one of the buttons on your controller, and the character you're playing will crouch down, and the screen will lose all of its color and just go kind of gray, and it's like you're listening intensely, and you will hear either other humans or infected that are nearby moving around, and they appear on the screen as kind of these white blobs, and the closer they are, the more defined they are of an image. Okay. And the farther away, it's just kind of a white, kind of a white blob, like a white, thing. And it's a way for you to kind of get the tactical, there's bad guys nearby. Where are they? And then you figure out how to, who, you in the game, you got to kill them all, right? And so then when you do that, it gives you kind of a way to like, okay, there's one here, there's one over there, there's one around the corner, there's one upstairs. And then you can kind of go, I'm going to get that one first, and then I'm going to do that, and so you kind of make your plan, right? And
Right.
And the stalker guys, when you do that, they don't show up because they don't make any noise, because you can't hear them, because they're sitting there waiting for you. Oh yeah, they're unbelievably awful. I mean, fun and intense, and you're like, oh my God, kill it. But that scene that we get here with Ellie in that the grocery store is, I mean, it's intense, it's scary, and it is exactly when you're playing the game, because they don't do what you think they're gonna do, and the first, like, when she comes down and she what is she, like, looks at a People magazine or something for a minute.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
And I think like Fergie's on the cover, maybe, and clearly it's from a long time ago. And then she hears a noise, and she's like suddenly like, oh, something's in here. And then she starts like slowly like walking, trying to figure out what made the noise. And you see way in the background, and I when we did this the first time, you had mentioned that you thought it was a cat because it's on all fours.
Yeah.
And I had the exact same thought. I'm like, oh, it's a cat. I'm like, okay, cool. But then I'm like, wait a minute, why would they be doing this with a cat? And then it cuts to one of my favorite scenes of this whole episode, which is Ellie's walking down like the central aisle of the grocery store, and as she's passing by these aisles that are perpendicular to the central one, she'll cross an aisle, and she's doing the very slow, she's got her shotgun out, and she's scanning and looking and looking for any signs of movement and then way down at the other end of these aisles that cross this main one, after she moves across one, the stalker runs across behind her and just out of sight, and it's just beautifully framed, and you really get the sense that she's like trying to hunt it, and it's trying to hunt her. And it was really cool. And then when finally she confronts it, she she chambers around in the shotgun, which makes a very loud noise. And then when she sees it, she's like, come at me, come charge at me.
Right.
And it doesn't, which again, totally not what they do,
Yeah, unexpected behavior.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. And then she, it runs away, and then she runs around the corner, and it's gone. And now she's like, what the hell is going on, right? And then my second favorite scene is then when she is moving further down that aisle, and she passes by one of the checkout registers, and after she clears it and it's behind her, we realize that the stalker is hiding underneath that checkout table and slowly comes out behind her, and that's when it lifts its head up for the first time, and we can see that it does have eyes, and it still has a little bit of a mouth, but it does have a lot of the quadriceps like growing out of the top of its head, and like I said, there are fibers coming out of its nose. It looks very, very creepy and cool. And I mean, how about that scene when it makes a noise behind her, and Ellie then goes, oh crap, it's behind me.
Yeah. Yeah. We talk about like being in the moment and being very aware of your surroundings. And I thought just like the way it's filmed, like I love a good, in a, suspense movie, a horror movie of any kind, when your main character is in the foreground and they are basically looking at you or, looking beyond. Or perhaps they're walking away from you and there's movement like either behind them, something, like say you're walking down the hallway in some slasher movie and you're walking away from the camera and all of a sudden something moves in the very front, like the foreground of the camera, and you're like, oh my God, something's there. And that's what's happening with this stalker. And it's so cool because, like I said, I really thought like it was so small and it was like up on a shelf, like it was way up high when you first see it, like sort of scamper around. It's on all fours. And I was like, oh, animal, cat, something like that. But then it started making,
Right. You're like, nope, that ain't no damn cat.
noises, and you're like, not a cat. And then when you see like glimpses of it here and there, and it's like stalking her and being all stealthy, and you're like, what is happening?
Oh, man.
Why is it doing that way? And it's so scary, and what's great is that shows how experienced Ellie is in these moments, is that even though the stalker is exhibiting like a behavior they've never seen before, she is still like being very careful. She's checking everything around her, all of her surroundings. She's doing her due diligence of trying to find where this stalker is, and she's being, very cautious, because if she wasn't, she'd just be like, do, 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 and walking all around and, come out and get me or whatever. She's being precise and going around corners and doing that, all the things you would do appropriately. It just so happens that it's like we said, it's exhibiting non-normal, clicker behavior, and is doing, is actually stealthily stalking her, which is so brand new. And that just gives it an extra level of absolutely ridiculously scary moment, and obviously it's kind of like on Walking Dead when they had the first run-in with a, air quotes, smart zombie, the one that picked up the rock or, was climbed the ladder
or could
or whatever,
open the door or whatever.
Yeah. So this is clearly going to come back in a later episode with, clickers that don't act the way, infected that don't act the way they're expected to
normally do,
because they're going to have some defensive, some thing happen, and they're going to use their defensive strategies, and they're not going to work because it's acting in a way that they're just not trained for.
Right.
So it was a scary scene, but had a lot to do with, like, it's not just this scene, but the fact that it's obvious we're going to see this again, and it makes you nervous about, oh God, they could just like pop out of nowhere.
Yeah. Well, and this is episode 1 of season 2, so I really doubt when I'm watching it that they're going to kill Ellie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But at the same time, as I'm watching this scene, I'm like, they're going to kill Ellie. So
this could happen. Yeah.
Because when it comes out behind her and it makes that noise, and she gets the eyes as big as saucers when she's like, oh crap, it's behind me. She like spins around and fires blindly right behind her, right where we think it is, and it's not there. So it baited her again into doing that, and then she's like, what the hell? And then it like somehow gets to the side of her and jumps her, and again, if she wasn't Ellie, she would be dead, because it bites her, for reals, right in the tummy, and that would be enough to infect the normal. If it had been Dina would be infected and be dead, but and then the fact that it bites her kind of is what allows Ellie to finally dispatch it, because it's so focused on biting her, Ellie's able to draw her pistol and, just, shoot it point blank and kill it. So I mean, like I said, as much as Ellie is doing all the smart, due diligent things of hunting this down and checking her corners and, making sure that there's nothing, to the left or the right or above and all that, the stalker is doing the same kind of stuff to her. I mean, it was a very, very intense moment. And you're right, clearly, one of the set pieces of this episode.
Oh, for sure. Sure. And it's great because we were both talking about how in that moment, a lot of times on TV shows that we watch, there's a tendency for like things to happen, and then they're just like, oh, don't tell anybody about what we saw or whatever, and that does not happen here. So even though Dina and Ellie know, like, oh crap, like we told Kat that we'd be right out, and it would be 5 minutes, and it'd be no big deal. There's no more than 2 or 3 of them in there, and we can handle it and whatever. And clearly we got into some crap, you know. We're going to have to report it. They know they're going to get into some kind of trouble, but they're clear about, you know, we know we did a wrong thing, but while we were there, this thing happened, and they tell the council about it. And that was a great scene, because it's like, you know, they're taking ownership of, like, you know, we need to tell you this thing that we saw. It's important, you know, you guys need to know about it.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I appreciate that they did that, for sure.
What I love is that, you know, when we get to that scene, one of the, I don't know if it's Maria or Tommy or somebody else raises the question to them going, are you saying it was smart? And Ellie's like, well, I'm not saying it could do math. She's like, but like she points out, but like it was, you know, doing all the things that we do to hunt them down to me, you know, and basically she uses the word, it was stalking me. And then they ask Dina, did you know, and you saw this? And Dina's like, absolutely, 100%, yes, I saw it. and so then they leave, and the council is left by themselves, and Tommy's like, what do you think? And Maria's like, well, Dina didn't see crap, she's just lying. But she's like, but I believe Ellie that, you know, what she saw is real. And they're kind of like, well, what do we do? And I think Tommy goes, well, maybe it's just a one-off. You know, like you know, and so it's like they're aware of it, but they're not like immediately like, oh my God, we have to form a committee to come up with a counter plan to, you know what I mean? It's like they're like, we'll just add it to the list of stuff to worry about, you know. But again,
this is number 75 on a list of 320.
Yeah, you know, but like you said, Ellie and Dina, they did the most they could do. They told the people in charge what they had encountered and that it's a threat. You know, so you give kudos to them for that. And I think we have to point out the barbecue, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, who doesn't love a good pun? I mean, Ellie does.
Right. That was Ellie's thing in season 1, right? And I think right there that should have, you know, given us a little tip off of that, you know, Dina maybe likes Ellie a little bit more than just like a BFF kind of thing, a platonic kind of thing. The fact that she thought that up like on the spot and told her, because she obviously knows Ellie at one point really loved those puns, you know, and so on. So it was very cute that she came up with that joke. And then I did the last thing I wanted to point out is before Ellie falls through the roof or through the floor. That top floor, it's kind of like the break room of the grocery store, because where Ellie is, there's like a kitchen and a refrigerator, you know, and a stove and a faucet, and clearly this is like the employees go up there, and you know their lockers are probably up there and stuff too. And on one of the walls is this big display, and it says employee of the month in big letters, and then there are all of these like 8.5 by 11 photographs of all these various people that were employees of the month, and they like, I think there's 12 of them because it's for the year, and I think it's 2013, and so, you know, they've got their picture for January, February, all the way through, and she's looking at it as she goes by because she's kind of studying her surroundings, and we get this quick shot, and like July, the picture for July is this like white poodle, right? And it's very obvious, right? I mean, you saw it, you know. And again, it's a little Easter egg, a little nod to the game players, because in the game, when you go into the supermarket, because you do go into that supermarket in the game, you don't run into Stalker, but you do go into the supermarket. And one of the things that the game does is periodically you find safes that are full of all kinds of supplies. They'll have all kinds of ammunition and medical supplies and different components that you can use to build like Molotov cocktails and explosives and stuff like that. Because, you know, it's a game and you do all that stuff. And they're all locked, all of them, and you have to find the combination. And usually whenever you find a safe in that room or in another room nearby will be a note that someone has left for someone else a long time ago, and it'll have the combination to the safe on it, and it'll be like, hey, couldn't wait any longer for you, had to leave, but I took everything I couldn't take with me and I put it in the safe, and here's the combination in case you forgot. Hope to see you. And then, signed by someone, right? So then once you have that, you can go, and then it's one of those dial combination safe things, and it's usually 3 numbers, and you enter it in, and then you open it up, you can take all the stuff. So for that scene, there's a safe in one of the rooms, and there's a note, and it's from someone, and they basically say all that stuff, and they say the combination is my good little boy. And they said, hopefully that's enough a hint for you. And if not, go into the room and look at the employee of the month. And so for a long time, I'm like, what the hell does that mean? And so eventually I went in and I looked, and sure enough, I finally noticed that one of the pictures is a dog. And I'm like, what the hell is a dog? And then I'm like, my good little boy. Oh, right. And so it was July of 13. So I thought, okay, it's 7. And then the last 2 numbers will be 13. And so then I did just trial and error, and it turns out the combination was 7, 26, 13. Open that safe. And again, it's a little Easter egg for the game players that everyone that played the game are like, I know what that means. So yeah, and it just tickles me to no end when they put those little nods in there, and they're just things that if you never played the game like you, when you saw that scene with the dog, you're like, that's weird. That's kind of funny that they would do that. And Ellie even says, like, hey, I got to show you something. It's really goofy, to Dina right before she falls through the floor. So, and that's all you would have thought of it. But for the gamer idiots like me are like, oh my God, I totally know what that is. So yeah, it was really fun.
Oh yeah. It's so funny because, we will have some feedback that we'll, have later on in the podcast from our pal Erica, and she also did the same thing, but for fun with her dog. She did like an employee of the month thing, but used like her dog's face in all of the employee of the month slots.
That's awesome.
So yeah. So yeah,
that's awesome.
Dog winner,
chicken dinner. Nice.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get to the dance.
Yeah, so the dance is, before she heads out to the dance, though, there's this great moment where Ellie masks her bite. She's getting ready to go to the dance, and she's like, just in case someone were to, say, lift her shirt, she doesn't want people to see teeth marks.
No, not a good thing.
She takes her knife, and she connects the teeth marks, so that now she just has an oddly mouth-shaped, she
has like a
she'll deal with the rest of it later. Yeah.
And I think doesn't she stitch it up too?
Yeah, she does work on stitching it up as well. But she clearly, it's almost as if she's had to do this before. And we do get the image of her spot on her arm. She always had a spot on her, like, the underside of her forearm that had, like, it looked like there were, like, cordyceps, like, under the skin surface or whatever. It just had, like, a wrinkly sort of, it almost looked burned, but we knew that it was, an infected point on her body, but just without there being any infection. And on her arm now, 5 years later, you can tell she's got this really cool tattoo that covers that whole area, but you can tell underneath the tattoo that skin is all burned. So I would assume, we talked about this a little bit, where it's like she appears to have been trying to mask that area. Yeah. So, no questions, no nothing. So I'm curious what they're cutting her, mouth, the bite marks. She's clearly well versed in this. She must have other spots where she's had, like, her foot or her arm, like, oh, now I have to put some scratches across it and just be like, oh, I cut myself on the fence.
Yeah,
or whatever,
right. Yeah, and I think we did talk about a little bit that in the game they do mention that it's because there's a point in the game where she is trying to tell another character that she's immune. She breaks down and does it, and she points that out, that spot on her arm. And the other character is like, no, you said that was, you spilled some chemicals on that, and it's a chemical burn. And so, yes, clearly Joel or her or both of them decided at some point that, that wound is going to attract a lot of unnecessary questions. And so they clearly poured something on it, something caustic that burned it a little bit, and I'm sure it hurt really bad. And then once it healed up, she went and had the artwork, the tattoo, that kind of blue web design thing that she's got all up and down her forearm. And then the story just is, yeah, she burned it, and then she decided to put the tattoo to try and make it look less icky, type thing. So yeah. And we'll have to see if that scene of her trying to tell another character that she was bit and previously, if that's going to make it into the show or not. So
so that's we start off with that. So she's trying to sort of mask her bite, but then she shows up at the event, and she's sort of hanging out by the bar. She's observing, because Dina is acting a fool, as the kids like to say.
Yeah.
And
she's putting on a show, Jesse says.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So there's this nice, funny moment between Jesse and Ellie, where she says that she's like, he says exactly that. She's putting on a show tonight. And because she is like dancing all around. She's clearly, it seems like she's drunk, but she admits later that she's just really stoned. Mm-hmm. And so, you can't help but, Ellie's like giggling about the whole thing. She's just watching her friend be an absolute boob. And she's just like, I can't, that's my friend. And she's acting like an idiot and whatever. But she appears to be enjoying herself, watching at least. So, and she makes a comment to Jesse where she's like, don't worry, you guys will be back together in like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, I don't think so.
Never happened. Yeah, never happened. Yeah. And Jesse, but when Dina comes over and collects Ellie, because Dina, when they're out on the patrol, Dina says, we'll go together. We'll go together and we'll dance and we'll get high and we'll just, have a great time as BFFs. And so when she finally sees Ellie, she's like, hey, and she goes and drags her out on the dance floor. And Jesse's like, hey, you guys got an early patrol tomorrow, so, don't party too hard. And they're just like, yeah, do we ever listen to anything anyone says?
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, exactly. And I love the moment too where she also admits, and Jesse's like says something about it, the party being whatever, lame or whatever it is. I can't remember what he says, but her response is, yeah, she's like, I had to get half drunk just to get here.
Just to show up. Yes.
Well,
right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Love that. So there's this really great, like, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that, I, as a gay woman, have had the moment where the seemingly straight girl is being flirty and flirtatious, and you're like, she's straight, I don't have a chance with her, she doesn't know I exist. And in the moment where Dina takes Ellie out to dance on the dance floor, I'm like, I've been that girl, I've been flirted with, and you don't know where you stand, because it's like, this person's a friend, and do you take that leap? Because I know this is going to sound terrible, but like, back in the day, if you're a boy dancing with a girl and you try to kiss her, it's one thing, but if you're a girl dancing with a girl or whatever, if you try to kiss and it's taken the wrong way, like, it could go badly.
It could go badly, sure.
It's, the world has changed, which is great. So it's nice to know that that's not as prevalent as it used to be back then. But, I've been that person at a party where you're like, wow, I'd be really great if this was serious. If this wasn't just like, she's just drunk.
It's the alcohol
she's,
talking.
Flirting. Right. So in that moment, I felt really strongly for Ellie, because I've been in that position where it's like, you don't know what to do next. You're feeling really emotional. You're feeling really, vulnerable in that moment. And the other person, you're not sure. Are they serious? Are they just fooling around? Are they just trying to have fun? Are they, whatever? And you don't know how to interpret the situation. And Ellie is smack dab right in the middle of that.
Oh, and on top
tough.
of it too, we find out that Dina just broke up with Jesse.
Right.
So there's
right,
that
exactly.
on there too, right? That
Yeah.
she's clearly and we get the sense from all of this that Jesse and Dina have one of those kind of relationships of they're together and then they're not, and then they're together and then they're not, and it's the roller coaster kind of thing. And this is one of those bits where I'm never seeing him again, and so Ellie is dealing with everything you just said of like, what do I do? How do I approach this? And she already knows that Dina is eventually going to go back to Jesse because that's what she does. And this is just one of these weird moments where she's acting out because she's angry with him. So, yeah.
So there's this great course of events that are just like, it just falls apart so quickly. Mm-hmm. In this moment, she's so like, Dina actually kisses her, and then the kissing gets more intense. And I'm sure, like, in that moment, it's like, we are the only two people that exist in the world in this moment. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, they're in a public place.
In the center of the dance floor.
Correct. So, not obvious or anything. And they get called out. There's this guy there, Seth, and he's like, hey. And they are like, oh, so, he's like, it's a family event. Mm-hmm. And they are borderline. They are just about like 10 seconds away from that whole like, hey, you want to get out of here? Like, let's go find a room somewhere. Mm-hmm. Kind of like they're almost there.
Yeah, almost.
And there. Yeah, and so to be in the middle of the dance floor and practically like just about ready to like start taking each other's clothes off, pretty much. It's not terrible that Seth is like, hey, this is a family event. Like, people are, so they are, chastened for a moment. They're like, oh, sorry, mm-hmm. And then they realize that he's still like staring at them. And they're like, ugh, I mean, whatever, sorry. Like, yeah. Whatever. They're like, because, saying sorry didn't do it. Mm-hmm. And he's still staring and he looks mad. And they're like, well, geez, I mean, sorry? Like, what do you... It seems like they're confused. Like, they don't understand. What's the big deal? Like, we said we're sorry. And then he's like, this is a church. Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh, God. So they had made the decision. They had started to walk away. Mm-hmm. And Seth uses the D word. Right.
He suddenly, for some reason, references, these structures in Holland that are used to hold out the water.
I know. And why would he do that?
It's so weird.
It is weird. And so if he hadn't gone there, that whole night would have gone totally differently. Yeah, but he made the choice. He said the word.
Yeah. You're right. They're leaving. It was over. And then he couldn't let it go.
No. And so he made his comment, and Ellie immediately whips around. Oh. What did you say? And before Seth can even take a breath to answer, and Ellie can say anything else, from the right-hand side of your screen, boom! Joel comes in and just totally, like body checks him and knocks him to the ground.
Right.
So
and Seth is an older dude.
Right.
You worry about the broken hips and stuff.
Yeah, and it's in that moment that it's like he escalated it. Like, Seth has some blame here. If he had just not said anything, none of it would have happened. Ellie was in that moment standing up for herself by turning around, and then Joel did that thing again where he is trying to save her. He's trying to protect her, and she doesn't want it. It's the worst thing ever. And it's so embarrassing, and there's all these people here, and in that moment she looks right at him and she says, what is wrong with you? And there's like silence and everybody's looking at him, and after a pause she looks at him, and with all the venom that she can summon, she says, I don't need your fucking help.
Yeah.
and then
Ugh.
turns on her heel and leaves. And he in that moment is like so completely embarrassed. Not embarrassed by what he did with Seth. That's
Yeah,
different.
and actually he leaves.
Yes, yeah.
He just kind of looks around and suddenly realizes everyone's staring and has taken this whole scene in, and he just sort of kind of tail between his legs, gets the hell out of there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, it is. I mean, she crushes him in that moment.
Yep.
And after he pushes Seth, he looks at her and he goes, "Are you okay?" And then that's like the last straw with Ellie, and then she just lets him have it with both barrels, so to speak.
Yeah.
And that line when she says, "I don't need your forking help," I mean, it's just, that just sums up their relationship right then and there.
Yeah, it's almost it feels almost irretrievable, which is so sad that it doesn't feel like they can get back to where they were, and it just intensifies because she comes home later, and and we didn't mention, but he discusses earlier in him meeting with the therapist that she moved into the garage, so she's not even living in the same house as him.
Right.
And so when she comes home, he's sitting on the porch and he's playing her guitar, which he's like, "Oh, I'll fix this. I'll put new strings on it," And it's so funny because that's such a boy thing to be like, "This will make everything better. I'll just put new strings on the guitar. It'll be great." So he's sitting there on the porch playing the guitar, and she comes home, and they just have this look between them. And he can't say I'm sorry because he can't. And she can't say anything because she's so absolutely infuriated in that moment, and she just walks away. And it's so sad to see how far they've gone, to how far apart from each other they've drifted. It's really, really terrible that they're just like no words exchanged between the two of them. Oh, it's so sad. And it's crazy because like in that moment, this is New Year's Eve, and that's what the party's for, and there's lights here and there, and people have some sparklers, and people are sort of like paired off and walking around town, and there's like laughter and giggling, and people, there's revelry like there would be on a New Year's Eve. Pretty normal, and that's
they show like a couple of people up on the fence, and they're like having a glass of something to toast the new year. So yeah, everyone is getting a chance to kind of have a little moment of like the way things used to be.
Yeah, and it's literally like all of that sort of normalcy going on around them, sort of on the edges. You can see it in like the background, and then this like standoff between the two of them. And no words, no nothing, and she just walks off. Oh, and it's just so heartbreaking. And then it sort of transitions to, we see, we've already been established, we see these people sort of, traipsing around and having a good time because of the New Year's, and they've got sparklers and whatever, and someone, like, drops their sparkler on the ground or whatever, and it's, like, right in front of the pipe that we saw earlier in the show, like the pipe leading out of the house, and it's
the sewage pipe,
and it's got all the the roots and everything growing out of it, and it's funny because when I first when I first watched it, I thought that the dropping of the sparkler was going to light the roots on fire and then set the house on fire. And then they were going to get in trouble because they didn't clear the roots and da-da-da. And he's getting forgetful because he's getting old and da-da. Like, I immediately extrapolated that. And I'm like, oh, God, it's going to set the house on fire and they need houses and blah, blah, blah. And then as the camera pans in and you see, oh, it's worse. Because there's living cordyceps inside the root structure that's inside this pipe. So that means the cordyceps are in Jackson. It's in the town. And I mean, it's in the pipes, and we don't know how widespread it is, but it's, it's not good. It's not a good thing.
It's not. And I mean, for me, because we see the cordyceps moving, and then the camera kind of cranes upward, and we see that the pipe that is in runs like out away from the city past the fence and stuff.
Yeah.
And I was just reminded of the scene or moment in the first season where we learned that like the root system is kind of like a telegraph, and that if one part of it detects people moving around or vibrations of them talking or moving, it can alert infected people and like kind of direct them to that area.
Yeah.
And so my thought was like, now that root system is going to bring on some massive horde to attack Jackson, because it's found out that there are people there, that there's prey there. So that was my thought, that it's like, you're right. It's bad enough that it's in the town, but it's just like, nope, now it's just like going to be open season. And they kind of have been saying that in little dribs and drabs in this episode, that there are more and more infected starting to show up.
Yeah.
Right. And this is, where are they all coming from? Right. Tommy thinks they might be coming from Alpine. Maybe they're migrating. They don't really know. It's just more and more. Maybe this is why, that the root system is kind of vectoring them in, saying, here's where you can find what you're looking for to, people to kill and infect. So, yeah, it's a hell of a way to end. But we also then jump to the Abby scene at the very end. So like you said originally, it's like dual bad things.
Yeah, dueling bad things. You mean you got the cordyceps pipe and you're like, oh, this is bad. And you're like, oh, yeah, this is equally as bad and possibly worse, because it pans over to the hillside. It pans over to, you see people, moving through a forest area first, and they're really well equipped. They've got like, they're equipped for the winter, but they've got like rifles and backpacks and whatever. So
they look very military-ish.
They're very coordinated, etc. So it's interesting. And then they sort of stop. And you see they stop on like the edge of this forest area, and you see the camera pan around to the face, and one of the people is Abby. Yes. Oh my God. And what's interesting too is when they were just them 5 years ago, it was like, 6 people there? Mm-hmm. This is not 6 people. This is like, 30 people it felt like, possibly more. It's hard to tell because it was like nighttime, they're moving through the forest. But it's a nice, decent group of people.
It's a goodly sized group that is very well equipped, and I think you had made the note that where they are is like the same spot where Joel and Ellie are at the end of season 1.
Yes.
When she said, "Swear to me that what you said was true." And in the distance down in the valley is Jackson, and they're in that like exact same spot. And all the difference is it's nighttime, and so in the valley you can just see the lights of Jackson, because Jackson has electricity and can have the night, like the street lights and stuff on. And so so now Abby has gone through these 5 years and has tracked down Joel. Right. And clearly they're I don't think it's to like give him an award of some sort.
No. But it just goes to show, like, that's how deep-seated her revenge is. Like, this whole season's going to be about revenge and bad feelings. It's Abby's revenge. It's Ellie's bad feelings. They're going to be, like, in direct contrast to each other. And just goes to show, like, how bad her revenge fantasy is, that it's like, it's 5 years later and she is just like, okay, we made it. This is great.
Yes.
And they show Abby and you're like, oh God, this is bad. And then boom, end of episode.
Yep. And then smash to black, and we're waiting for episode 2.
Yeah, so what a great start, and to end on that, like, that moment of heightened, like, oh no, and then that's that.
Oh no!
Yeah. Just a great sort of like wrap up there. Anything that we like on our list that we skipped over that you want to make sure we talk about? Anything we may have discussed last night?
Yeah, right.
That we didn't hit now this time?
We've done it multiple times here. Yeah. Just again, one of the things that I'm going to try and do each episode each week is kind of point out, this was in the game, this wasn't in the game,
Yeah.
moments, and just hopefully find, oh, okay, here's where they've zigged where the game zagged, kind of a thing, because it's going to happen. They've said it's going to happen, so I want to be able to point that stuff out, and just to give you an idea, the dance happens in the game, all right, but we don't see it. It's already happened when the game starts,
Right.
and so. Like literally the game opens, like I said, and you're playing Abby, and it's literally the last scene of the episode is kind of where the game starts with Abby, and her people are there, and they're actually in this like house up in the mountains away from Jackson, and they've set up camp there, and they're talking about, do we think he's there? Yeah, he probably is. Man, we're going to get him. And again, they don't really say who him is, but you're like, I wonder who he's talking about. Probably Joel, but we don't know. And so that's how it starts. And you actually play Abby a little bit in the beginning of the game, running around in the woods, and there's all kinds of infected, and they come out of the snow, and it's real cool and exciting. And then the next scene it goes to is the scene where Ellie is in her garage, and Dina comes to get her for the patrol. And, the whole scene with the holster and all that stuff. And this is after the dance. And so Ellie is, the kiss has already happened, and Ellie is really in the, like, I don't know what to do mode because of everything that you said. Was Dina just, high? Was she, it was the alcohol and the pot that was talking. It was making her do that. You know what I mean? And so Ellie doesn't want to ruin the friendship by trying to push anything. So it's kind of got that weird context. But then they go out on patrol, and that's how the game starts. So the whole dance sequence is not in the game at all. In that they talk about it, but we don't actually get to experience it at that moment. It's a past event, which again is different, but kind of the same in that at least it's included. And then the other thing I wanted to say was when Dina comes to get her, and they put the holster on and everything, and she comments on that you shouldn't have traded your boots because you're going out in the snow and your sneakers and all that. When Ellie leaves, the last thing she does is she grabs the switchblade, which is like sticking in like a table right by the door.
Right.
And that moment, straight out of the video game. Absolutely 100% straight out of the video game, because you do that. You kind of, she comes to get you, and you kind of like equip yourself with a lot of stuff that is lying around the room you're in, and the very last thing when you move to the door, your switchblade's there, and you grab it just like she does, and you click it closes and put it in your back pocket. So that was kind of a neat little Easter egg too. So yeah. So
overall though, great episode. Great way to start off the season. I am so excited to watch the next episode. They really, at the end of the episode, they do on the app, folks. If you're watching on the broadcast channel, which not as many people do that anymore. They mostly watch through the app. But if you don't watch through the app, stay through the end of the credits, because they always put like a little featurette at the end. And like I watched the broadcast version, I taped it on the DVR and whatever, but I went to the app afterwards, and I just forwarded all the way to the end, and they always put like a really nice featurette, give you like little backstories, stuff about filming and things like that. So and at the end of the episode, for either one, didn't really matter, they, instead of doing like scenes for next week, they did like, here's what's coming up this season. So there was sort of like a mixture of stuff, so we don't really have a sense of what direction the next episode's going to take. But I'm still like super excited for it.
Oh, I am too. We see Jeffrey Wright.
Oh yeah, that's right.
He's great in everything he does, and I can just tell you, as the the game player, lots of little things I saw, I'm like, that's in the game, that's in the game, that's in the game. So a lot of it is going to be stuff that at least I'll have an idea of what what possibly is going on. But Yeah, the featurette was great too, in that we hear Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann, and they both are talking about the lie that Joel has told, and literally, this is like the heart of all of his problems with Ellie, and there's no easy resolution because he firmly believes he did the right thing. And she can't forgive him for lying to her, even though you get the idea that she probably has figured it out, but she wants him to tell her. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so and just how that's going to kind of be the thing about their relationship is that it's this lie, and it's the consequences. There's so many consequences in this episode of what we see, with Abby, with with this lie between Joel and Ellie, with this new type of infected, and what are the consequences going to be of that, because obviously they're getting smarter, and so it's the featurette's really fun, and I highly just like you, I highly recommend that if you have Max, that you check it out. And it's just like the Book of Daryl would do the same thing. At the end of every episode there'd be a little 10 minutes behind the scenes where they would pick one sequence and explain how they shot it, and then they talk to the actors, and it was always great to see some of these deadly serious characters, and they're like smiling and laughing because they're people playing a role and all that stuff. So but I highly recommend that you check that out. It was definitely worth it, and the scenes for the upcoming season were very exciting and promising for me, because I'm like, ooh, they're gonna do that, they're gonna do that, they're gonna do that. So
it's gonna be exciting. We're looking forward to it. So I guess that's all we have to talk about for the episode. So we are gonna go ahead and take a quick break. When we come back, we're gonna discuss our listener feedback and what's coming up next week on the podcast.
So everyone, please stick around, because we will be right back.
Now there's about 20 of them out there.
What will we do?
Don't worry, we're safe in here. They'll never get in.
Why is it that in every zombie story, people always think that their safe haven is invulnerable?
I know. It's like, hello, the walkers are totally gonna get in. You better get ready for it.
No! Diane, get behind me. No, it's not stopping.
Do something, Jack!
And another thing, how come nobody in a zombie story has ever seen a zombie story?
Do you know how much time in human life would be saved if just one person in the group was up on the genre?
What do we do?
Aim for the head.
What?
Aim for the head.
You heard them. Aim for the head.
Quick, Diane, I think we should try and fix the barricades.
I think we should listen to them.
Now, that's the first good idea they've had all episode.
I still don't think they're gonna make it.
Aim for the Head, a horror apocalypse entertainment podcast. Join hosts Diana and Steve as they recap and discuss the best of horror, sci-fi, fantasy, and apocalyptic entertainment. Aim for the Head, available wherever you listen to podcasts. Find us on Instagram and Blue Sky.
Hey there, this is Greg Nicotero, and you're listening to Aim for the Head podcast with Diana and Steve. And don't forget to always aim for the head, because body shots, they really just don't work.
Hey there, everybody. We are back. We're going to jump right into our listener feedback, and then we're going to chat a little bit about what's coming up on the podcast. But first off, Steve, why don't you take it away and give us a little bit of our feedback flavor going on right now?
All right. Well, starting out, we have actually some feedback from our last episode 340, when we reviewed John Carpenter's Escape from New York. Mm-hmm. And, our very, very close friend and compadre, Joe Griffin, did send in some feedback via the email, but there's a little debate as to when this was actually received, because he says it was well within the the boundary that was set up to get it
I call
included.
bullshit.
And yes, the person that actually checks the feedback, which would be Diana, says it didn't show up in there. But in any case, we did receive it, and we did want to include it because obviously we love it when anyone sends us feedback, and it's so on. So these quick comments here. This is about John Carpenter's Escape from New York, which again is episode 340. And if you have not checked it out, yeah, you really should, because it was a really fun conversation. So
It was.
Joe says, and he starts out, and this is via the email, and then he says, pouring one out for 7-shot Maggie, and those are in parentheses. And Joe and I were joking about this, that in actually multiple John Carpenter movies, the editor, which is this guy named Todd Ramsey, he edited a lot. He was a huge editor in the 80s, worked on a lot of movies in general, but he did a lot of John Carpenter movies. And one of the things that we laugh about is that there are times when he apparently doesn't know how to count. And it could be the director too. We don't know this for sure. But if you watch John Carpenter movies, there's a very high tendency for guns that have 6 bullets in them to be shot 7 times. And I mean, literally, it happens like in 3 or 4 movies. So it's a lot.
Yeah.
And Escape from New York is no exception, because Maggie, at the end, when the Duke is approaching the car, she's just shooting and shooting and shooting with this revolver, and it just keeps going. It's really cool.
Nice.
Anyway, so he goes on to say, all the bridges and waterways are mined. How about the tunnels? They don't say nothing about the tunnels. And I know that was your comment from last week, that if you want to, what more could the movie have done? And you very, very, very specifically said, I wanted to go into the tunnels and see what was down there. And so
yes.
Joe is kind of echoing those sentiments there. Then he goes on to say, post-production anecdote from sound designer David Lewis Udall. At 12 minutes in, there's a point of view shot of Air Force One going across the river towards the city. And it's right before it crashes, and then Lee Van Cleef, goes, I'm going in, and then he goes in with all the troops, and then he gets literally Romero gives him the finger, and all that stuff happens. Joe goes on to say, the VFX team made the river waves by splashing black paint on the studio floor and then roughing it up with push brooms and lighting it. When they showed it to John Carpenter, he said, that's fantastic. How'd you do that? And the VFX guys told him, and once he knew what it was, he frowned, and then he goes, play it again. And so they played the sequence again, and now it was obvious to John Carpenter that it was just a bunch of black paint on concrete. And so he thought about it for a minute, and he said, no, you fooled me the first time. It's fine. And then he added, if I ever ask you how you did something again, don't tell me.
I love that story. That's so great.
It is. And and it's funny because watch it now again, now that you know that. And when you look at it, you're like, oh, yeah, it's a floor. But before you had that little bit of information, you totally bought that it was water at nighttime. So, good job for them. And I know you had kind of brought that up about the city in general, that they had to build it, and there was no computers to generate any of it. It's all practical stuff, and it's just a tribute to the ingenuity of those guys and gals back then, that they're like, hey, we got to do this. How are we going to do it? And the stuff they come up with to make it work is always fun, I think. So
nice.
Joe goes on to say, this movie always seemed a bit like Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. There's a storyline, sure, but the focus is more about a series of vignettes with strange characters. And yeah, I would agree. That's very true. That, all the characters he runs into are really kind of weird and odd and different and so on.
Right.
He finishes it up by saying, I would love to have seen a version of this movie made 30 years earlier with Lee Van Cleef as Snake. And wow, that would be interesting. I think Snake would have been a lot darker than even Kurt Russell made him. If Lee Van Cleef, who of course plays Houck in the movie, the police commissioner, if when he was a young man, if he had played it, that would have been real interesting. I guess the question I would have for Joe is, would you would you be assuming that the movie would be made with like 1950s sentiment and ideas on movie making also? Or did you just want to see a 30-year younger Lee Van Cleef in the 1980 version? You know what I mean? It's like, a movie made in 1951, totally different in terms of what they could get away with, what they would try to get away with, all of these things that versus 1981. So I think we need a little more information, Joe, on what you mean, but it's a really interesting idea.
Mm-hmm.
So.
He would have made a good Snake too. Yeah.
He would have. Yeah, he would have. It'd been cool. All right, but that's it from Joe. So thank you so much for sending it in, Joe. And by all means, keep it coming, man. We love it.
And this should serve as a reminder for people that you can send us in feedback at any time, and we'll include it in the next episode. So if you're listening to this and you had some thoughts about episode 1 and you didn't get it in before we recorded, send it and we'll include it next week. We'd be happy to.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe. Thanks for writing in. We love it. So next up, we got some feedback about this actual episode. So this is feedback for episode 1 for Last of Us. And this is from, surprise, surprise, Erica Price. And Erica wrote in via the Facebook and says, I love that we're starting right back on the side of the hill. And then bam, giraffes. I do feel bad for these fireflies. In the midst of an apocalypse, they were really trying hard. We may think cutting Ellie's brain out or whatever the surgeon was going to do was cruel, but we don't know what other things they had done before Ellie and Joel arrived. It's true. In fact, there's a good after the episode vignette. If you watch on the app, there's like an 8-minute, inside the episode thing. It's great. So even if you've watched the episode through HBO or if it's on your DVR, go to the app and then watch that last, 8 to 10 minutes that they'll give you. And they talk a lot about something we have discussed many, many times, and we probably will again when Dead City is back, is, Negan is a bad guy, but if you tell the story from Negan's perspective, is Rick the bad guy? So if you apply that same logic to the Fireflies and Joel and that, his massacre he created, Joel was doing something altruistic and was saving Ellie's life. But from their perspective, he's the bad guy. And I just think that's going to be interesting to sort of delve into that, because there's a lot of gray area there,
Well, just
saving
imagine.
Ellie is one thing. Saving Ellie is one thing, but doing what he did was it's a lot, and he has a lot to answer for.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, just imagine if instead of getting the whole season of Joel and Ellie, if the show had started and Abby was the main character and she comes back from, a mission, a patrol or something to the hospital and everybody's dead. And they have this clue of this smuggler guy double crossed them and killed everybody. You'd be like, oh my God, Abby's the hero.
Yeah.
Abby's going to go get the guy and going to set things right, because he's got it coming. You would totally think that, who would turn out to be Joel, he's the governor, he's the Whisperers, he's Negan, he's the guy that you just can't wait to die. So yeah, it's all, like Obi-Wan said, it's all dependent on your point of view.
Yeah. From a certain point of view, absolutely. Okay, so continuing on with what Erica says, she says here, what's up with Abby and her friends' watches? Yeah, we didn't discuss that. They kind of focused in on Abby's watch, and I have a feeling that's going to come back at some point. So that's interesting. And it says the camera sure lingered there. It did. And then she continues on and says, LOL, constructometer.
Did he tell you about the big dial?
Yeah, did he tell you? And she says, Joel is such a good daddy. Okay. Catherine O'Hara, she's so awesome. I hope we get lots of her thistles and dirt tea. That's right. Thistles and dirt. That's right. This therapy session is so well done. Joel's guilt runs so deep. That lip quiver, Lasai. I'm not a game player. Do the infected kill each other? Why are there so many dead around the bear and the one just inside the market? Just for grins, I'll include a pic of my dog, which she did, Pearl, as my employee of the month. She won every dang time. And she includes this picture. It's so adorable. It's just a picture, it's like an employee of the month thing or whatever, but she literally put a picture of her dog in it in like most of the months. It's adorable.
That's awesome.
For as defiant and independent as Ellie is, I'm really glad she and Dina told the council about the stalker. Yes, I agree. I could see her and Dina being scared to say anything for fear of them being pulled from patrols, which they clearly both love doing. Poor Joel. Don't give up on her. And just like that, looks like Jackson is facing annihilation from the Cordyceps and Abby's group. What do you call a bear with no teeth? A gummy bear.
Oh, Ellie would appreciate that, and she'd write it in her journal.
She would. She absolutely would.
And then she'd write, "Don't fork it up. Don't fork it up. Don't fork it up."
Yeah. Erica asks about the so many dead around the bear, and I think maybe like a bear has really good fight or flight instincts too. So I think they weren't. Maybe the infected weren't expecting something so ferocious. They're used to something smaller, like something more like their size. A big grizzly bear like that, when it comes up, it can be 8 feet tall if it stands on its hind legs. So, it was more than I think they were bargaining for. So I think the bear tore apart a lot of those infected, and only just barely, that feral stalker, as it were, seems like it got away and was pretty lucky to have done so, because it really does look like a murder-suicide with the bear there. It's quite the scene.
The bear's there, and then, I mean, literally, there are like arms and legs of the infected strewn all around it. So, yeah. And like you said, what happened here? For all we know, maybe the bear had cubs, and the infected tried to move in on one of the cubs, and Mama Bear came and defended it. Maybe the bear was super hungry because there's no food and tried to eat one of the infected. I mean, you no idea what happened, but yeah, the bear did a ton of damage there before it finally succumbed. And then to answer your question, Erica, the infected do not attack each other. They have some, very similar to the ghouls of The Walking Dead and the Romero universe, that they just have some ability to tell that, oh, you know what, you're just like me and I don't eat you. It has to be uninfected or living people for the ghouls. Now, it doesn't seem to work with Ellie. Like, they still consider Ellie to be food, even though she kind of has the cordyceps in her, right?
Right.
But for whatever reason, she's won't become like them, but they don't consider her to be like them, which is a weird thing. But for the most part, you could have 10 infected people standing next to one another and they wouldn't attack each other. They would, just ignore each other. So
yeah, interesting. Thanks for writing in, Erica. We love hearing from you, and hope to hear from you every week. And again, like I just said, people, if you had a thought about episode 1 and you want us to chat about it next week, then by all means, please send in your feedback. We'd love to continue chatting. We're fine with discussing next week things that you thought of, things that you brought up with, maybe something we discussed during the podcast triggered something in your head that you wanted to chat about. So please, 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 please send us the feedback. We'd love to hear it. Coming up next week, episode 2, very exciting title and description. It's called Not Available Yet.
It's called NA.
Yeah. At the time of this recording, they have not released either. And I have a feeling that that's going to be very similar all season long. We'll probably go all week and not know, and maybe they'll release the information Friday, Saturday, something like that.
Yeah,
And then
I think it'll be Sunday, like Sunday afternoon or something like that,
Yeah.
If they follow the game, episode 2 would obviously be called Ellie Gets Married. No, what? No.
Oh my
no,
God.
No.
Joel dies. No, I'm kidding. I kid because I really don't know. Yeah, but I mean, we'd share our thoughts on what we're excited about for the next episode, but we don't know what's going to happen. They do a really good job of picking right up where they left off, so I would assume we'll see some of Abby's people arriving. I'm curious if they're gonna try and like infiltrate and like have like an actual battle, or do they try to get taken in as refugees? Because really, they don't care about Jackson. They just want to kill Joel. So I'm curious if if that's one of the reasons they showed the refugees is that I actually was looking at the people that were being brought in and I was like, is this how they infiltrate? Or, does Abby just show up there? And she's like, oh my God, you're Joel. Mm-hmm. So I know you probably can't reveal anything, but I'm curious to see how the Abby thing sort of plays out.
Basically, I know how the game does it. But I have no idea if they're gonna do it. So
they may do something totally different.
Yeah. So again, I mean, I like the root thing that is not in the game at all. So they could be going a completely different direction. So I did watch the little featurette at the end of the episode, and there was. We've talked about this before lots of times when at the end of the first episode, rather than getting scenes for next week, you get the sort of things to look forward to this season.
Yeah, the season, yeah.
And you get little bits and a lot of stuff that they showed in there. I'm like, yep, that's from the game. That's from the game. That's from the game. So I think the storyline's going to be close, but again, we'll have to see where and when do they pick to divert and go a different direction. So, I'm trying to think of what is his name, Jeffrey Wright.
Oh, Jeffrey Wright
from Westworld and stuff.
Yeah,
he is in it, and so I'm super excited because that guy is great.
He really is.
And fantastic actor, so I'm excited to see him. And so it like I said, there's a lot. And that little bit of like things for coming up in the season, I saw lots of game stuff. So it's going to be real interesting to see where they go with it.
Yeah. And I like you said, the Jeffrey Wright thing, I had totally forgotten they'd made some announcement, months and months and months ago about him being in the cast. And I had forgotten all about that. And so I'm like you, very excited. He's a fantastic actor, and I'm excited to see what he brings. It'll be interesting to see.
It is. It is.
So that's that about Last of Us, but we went to a convention this past weekend, did we not?
Yes, we did.
Yeah. So this past weekend was Chicago's C2E2 convention, and it's a really good sort of mixture of pop culture, entertainment from all kinds of genre. It's 80s movies, cult classics, sci-fi, children's things, wrestling people, you name it.
Anime
but the last, lots of anime, lots of animated, voice actors and things like that. They've got a really great focus on artists as well. They have an entire section called Artist Alley. It's like 20 to 30 rows of just all artists and artisans, and some of them are comic book artists and some of them are just artists who do specific art, and it's just beautiful. I love Artist Alley, is one of my favorites. And then there is all kinds of great commerce happening. Plus you've got panels and you've got the celebs that are there, so autographs and etc. One thing I would say about C2E2 is, occasionally they have like a year here and there where with cancellations and, people being committed to other things. Sometimes they have like, it's not a stellar lineup, but even if they don't have a lot of great people, it's still such a fun con to go to because of all those other things, the artists, the vendors, etc. And it's just so much fun to go to. And it's always well organized. There's plenty of space. They use a really large, the convention center that they're using is really large. They have plenty of space for, lines and overflow lines. So, some of the gripes that we had with Fan Expo last year is something you usually just don't see at all at C2E2. It's just it's a well-oiled machine, man. And they do a really, really good job. And I think a lot of that has to do with their space too. They just have a space that you can have like nice long lines and not have to worry about being in the way of other things. And so most of the sort of celeb stuff we did was because of a couple of things that you wanted to get signed. So why don't you chat a little bit about some of the celebs we got to meet?
Yeah, well, we the big panel that we wanted to see was the Breakfast Club.
Yes.
Which this is the 40th anniversary of the Breakfast Club, and this was the first time since the movie, supposedly, that all 5 of the kids from the movie were going to be together on stage. And so you had Judd Nelson and Molly Ringwald and Anthony Michael Hall and Ali Sheedy and Emilio Estevez. So you had all of them. And apparently, when we were watching the panel, they kind of said that this was the person who was like finally joining the party and coming to these type things was Emilio Estevez. Up to this point, he had not participated. So and Molly Ringwald made the joke that they don't have to use the cardboard cutout of Emilio now. But yeah, it was they were really fun, and it was kind of interesting because it was very similar to the characters in that the people that talked the most in the panel were Judd Nelson and Molly Ringwald. And then Anthony Michael Hall would be third, and then Amelia was fourth, and then Ali Sheedy, much like her character in the movie, just said very little. Did not really say much at all. But they were really they were a lot of fun. They said a lot of really cool stuff, and of course, what made it special was the Breakfast Club was filmed here in Chicago. So they're kind of not only getting back together for the first time in 40 years, but they're kind of getting back together where they made the movie in the first place. And so that was a lot of fun. And they told some good stories and talked a lot about, the memories and the idea that they kind of made this movie that for, a generation at that point really spoke to, and it was very obvious the love they all had for John Hughes and in the way he made his movies and how much freedom he gave them to do their roles and how he was always, listen to them. Molly Ringwald and Anthony Michael Hall were like 16 when they made that movie, and yet they were collaborating with the director on choices for the characters and things, which all of them said, this is not normal in film. That have a director that not only likes you, but cares about your input and will use it. That is the exception is kind of what a lot of them said, that most of the time the directors are just like, just shut up and hit your marks, and so, yeah, it was a really great panel. And so after that ended, we went over and we got to meet Ali Sheedy. And she is delightful. There's no doubt. She was very nice and sweet. I told her, I said, if I were to make a list of people I thought I would have no chance of ever meeting ever, I said, you would be on the list. And she looked at me and she goes, and here we are. And I'm like, I no. So, but yeah, she was really sweet. And I had her sign a War Games poster that I got back in the day in the 1980s and had on my wall for a long time. I think it actually went to college with me and was on my college wall for at least a year or two. So lots of pinholes and so on. But that was a lot of fun. And then the other person that we really wanted to meet was Nancy Allen. And of course, Nancy Allen is an actor from that time frame. She was married to Brian De Palma for a little while. She's in a lot of Brian De Palma movies.
Yes.
You know, she started out in Carrie. And then went on and was in Blowout. Both of those, she was with John Travolta. And then she made Dress to Kill in the last of like that trilogy, if you will. And she went on, she was in RoboCop and you know, had a very long and lucrative career and made a lot of really great stuff. But we went there really to meet her because my friend and friend of the show, Joe Griffin, he has a Blowout poster that back at maybe 6-7 years ago, we were at a show and we met John Travolta and he signed the Blowout poster, which was really cool. And then, so now we have his signature and then he got Nancy Allen to sign it as well. So now we just need John Lithgow on that one and we're all set. But that was really fun. And then I had Nancy Allen sign a Dress to Kill poster that I bought. And it's what's called an Australian daybill, which is a smaller poster. It's not like a full-size American 27 by 41. It's much smaller and more rectangular in shape. And I thought it was just beautiful. It had a red, majority of it was red, and then in the middle of it you had the image of Nancy Allen, and she's like sitting there and she's like putting on her nylons, and then in the background the door to the room, the bathroom is slightly open and the killer is looking through holding the razor blade. It's a really, really awesome poster, and I got her to sign that for me. And yeah, she again, the nicest person, you know, was just very excited and thrilled that people, you know, wanted to get her autograph and stuff. So yeah, and what made it even better was that we got both of those autographs in like 45 minutes, maybe.
Record timing.
Yeah, I mean, it was unbelievable. And then we were done, and then the rest of the day we could, you know, go to Artist Alley or just, you know, walk around everything else and do a little shopping. And yeah, it was super fun. It was a super great day. And I posted on the website, I picked up Walking Dead comic book number 171, which is the first appearance of the princess.
Yes.
In the Walking Dead comics, and that was a treasure for me because I've been looking for that issue, and surprisingly, I was not finding it in lots of places because it's the first appearance of Princess. So, but I was able to secure that one along with a few other ones to flush out the collection. So that was very cool, and I know you bought some cool stuff as well. I think everybody participated, bought a lot of stuff, whether it was pins or, you know, comic books or whatever. So yeah. It was a lot of fun.
We all got a little something fun for ourselves or for someone else, and it was great. And we all persevered. Not a single one of us bought fudge.
Yes, we were able to overcome that urge. Yes.
It's you have to understand, and now it's grown. There's like 3 or 4 different fudge vendors. And you got to understand, people, they do these like specials for the con where you like buy a pound of fudge, but they'll break it up into different flavors. And when I tell you that we have done this in the past, and you end up, next thing you know, you're at home and now you have a pound of fudge in your house. So what do? You
eat it.
So it all seems like a really good idea at the time, but we're just like, resist the fudge. And it's terrible because it's brightly colored. It's fun. It tastes delicious.
And there's like 40 flavors. Yeah, it's incredible.
God. Yeah. So resist the fudge. We did resist, and we persevered. So, you know, until next year, C2E2,
that's right.
You'll try and snag us again.
well, and we'll see, because usually the fudge guys that are at C2E2 also show up at Fan Expo. So we'll see if we can resist them that time around.
Well,
So.
what you do is don't spend your money on fudge, but go to the bundt cake people.
And I was going to say that's our other weakness
where you
is
spend
the
your
nothing
money.
bundt cakes people always get us, and we end up with 6 of those bad boys. And man, are they great! Oh,
I know. Who can say no, really? I mean,
so-
and if they're going to give you a deal and give you a cute little bag to go with it,
Oh,
how do
I
you
mean,
say no?
you'd be
You're
foolish
practically
not to.
they're paying you to get it. Really, is what's happening. So the only other thing we have coming up, other than doing the podcast, is want to let you know that they've started advertisements. We may have mentioned it before that there's a local podcaster here in Chicago, Nick DiGilio, who does his own Nick D podcast. He's heavily involved in Flashback Weekend, and he does movie reviews, etc. He reviewed movies for WGN radio for years and years and years locally. But he does a film series at a local theater just outside of Chicago in Oak Park. And we went last month, was it? And saw, oh my God, what did we go? Yeah, that's right. Escape from
We saw Escape from New York in March.
And then we covered it on the podcast. Now we have already covered the movie that we're going to see next, but Mad Max Fury Road is on May the 14th. We already have our tickets, and we are excited for that show. That's going to be a lot of fun. Such a great epic movie to see on the big screen. And Nick does like little bits of trivia at the end with like little giveaways. He'll introduce the movie, talk a little bit. But it's great because you're in a room with like-minded individuals and people that respect the film, etc. So, no outbursts or anything, but people will clap and laugh in all the right places and stuff like that. So if you're in the Chicago area or in the suburb area and you can do the drive to Oak Park, May the 14th, it's Classic Cinemas, I think.
Yeah, it's the
name of the place.
Lake Cinema.
Yes. So look that up and get your tickets. We will be there. We're going to have a blast. Sure, it's a school night, but, maybe you can go in late to work the next day.
Yeah, people your boss will understand.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to do this for entertainment purposes. That's fine.
Right. That's right.
So we'll be talking about that even more as we get closer to the date and any other conventions we got coming up on the schedule. But I think that's it. I think that's all we got to chat about this week.
Just, get those taxes in, people. It's tax day.
Yeah, today's the day. You've got like 2.5 hours. So
2.5
3.5
hours.
hours.
Again, it just has to be postmarked today. So
that's right. So, postmark and, get it in the mail.
Get them out there. You know it.
So that's going to do it for us this week. We look forward to chatting with you all next week for episode 2. But until then, as always, I'm Diana.
And I'm Steve.
And don't forget to always aim for the head.
Because those body shots, they just don't work.
To send us an email, write us at aimfortheheadpodcast@gmail.com. And our Twitter handle is @AFTH Podcast. Pictures and video are always welcome at our Instagram account, Aim for the Head Podcast, all one word. But the best way to keep in touch with us is to just like our Facebook page to get all of our updates in your feed.
Welcome back to Soup Talk. This is episode 600, and our guest will once again be Sarah.